You need to leave. Please, you can't do this to me. It's over. Now go.
You are doing this. Just go, Mother. No, this can't be happening. I know. Please help me, Mom.
Mama, please. Look at this. They're gonna take everything. You have to sign. Why? Who's taking it? What exactly is this, Sarah? Tell me.
13 days after I buried my husband of 44 years, my only son stood in my kitchen and told me I needed to leave my own home. "You can't manage this place alone," Mom, Brandon said, as if the decision had already been made. Then I saw the realtor's folder on the counter. He hadn't come to help me grieve. He had come to sell my house. By the next morning, my key no longer opened the front door, and several boxes of my belongings were waiting in the garage. Inside one of them was Raymond's old leather wallet. Behind his expired driver's license, I found a faded bank card from a bank I had never heard him mention. And tucked beside it was a handwritten note with 4 words, "Ask for Denise Carter." Before I tell you what happened when I took that card to the bank, please like this video and subscribe if stories about family dignity and second chances mean something to you. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child locked you out while you were still grieving? I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. 14 days after the funeral. If you had asked me before Raymond died whether I knew my husband completely, I would have said yes without hesitation. 44 years gives you that kind of confidence. I knew he took his coffee black but always waited 5 minutes before drinking it. I knew he hated buying new shoes and kept old ones long after the soles had worn smooth. I knew he checked every door twice before bed, hummed when he balanced the checkbook, and pretended not to like the lemon pound cake I baked because he knew I would cut him a second slice. Or at least I thought I knew him. Raymond and I had lived in the same brick house outside Richmond, Virginia for 31 years. We bought it when Brandon was 11. It wasn't a mansion. It had 3 bedrooms, an aging deck Raymond kept promising to rebuild, and a maple tree in the backyard that dropped more leaves than seemed physically possible. But it was ours. Every room held a piece of our marriage. The dining room still had a faint scratch in the hardwood from the Christmas Brandon received his first bicycle and insisted on riding it indoors. The kitchen cabinets were the ones Raymond and I painted ourselves one summer when we couldn't afford replacements. Upstairs, a pencil mark inside the hallway closet showed Brandon's height every birthday until he turned 16 and announced he was too old for such things. That house wasn't an investment to me. It was 44 years made visible. Raymond died on a Tuesday morning. Nothing about that sentence became easier no matter how many times I had to say it. He had complained of indigestion the night before. I told him we should call the doctor. He smiled, patted my hand, and said he'd probably eaten too much chili at dinner. At 5:17 the next morning, I woke to a sound I had never heard from him before. By 7:03, I was sitting beneath fluorescent lights at St. Mary's Hospital, while a doctor half my age told me they had done everything they could. There are moments when the world doesn't shatter loudly. It simply stops making sense. I remember staring at the doctor's mouth moving while thinking about Raymond's coffee mug sitting beside the sink. I had forgotten to wash it. That stupid thought became the only thing my mind could hold. Brandon arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later. He wrapped both arms around me. "I've got you, Mom." For several days I believed him. Brandon handled things I couldn't bring myself to touch. He called the funeral home. He contacted relatives. He helped choose the casket when every option looked equally unbearable to me. Megan organized food after the service and answered the door when neighbors arrived carrying casseroles. I was grateful, truly grateful. At 68, I had suddenly become half of something that had existed for most of my adult life, and I wasn't prepared for how helpless grief could make a person feel. The first strange moment came 3 days after the funeral. Brandon and I were sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by sympathy cards. He picked up a stack of mail. "Do you know how much is left on the mortgage?" I looked at him. "The mortgage?" "Yeah, on the house." "There isn't one." His eyebrows lifted. "Dad paid it off. We paid it off 9 years ago." "Oh." He nodded slowly. I didn't think much about it. Then he asked, "Whose name is on the deed?" I put down the card I was holding. "Mine and your father's." Right, but how? What do you mean, how? Like joint tenancy tenants by entirety. Something else. That surprised me. I don't remember the legal wording, Brandon. He leaned back. I'm just trying to make sure everything's clean. Clean. It was such an odd word for a house where my husband's jacket was still hanging by the back door. Henry at the funeral home said probate can get complicated, he added quickly. I nodded because I didn't have the strength to argue about something I barely understood. The next day he wanted to know about Raymond's life insurance, then my retirement savings, then whether Raymond had any investment accounts, then whether we'd updated our wills. Each question by itself could have been reasonable. Together they began to feel like someone quietly opening drawers in a room I hadn't invited them into. I finally said, Brandon, why are you so worried about money? His expression softened immediately. I'm worried about you. I have enough to live on. For how long? I stared at him. He reached across the table and covered my hand. Dad handled a lot. You shouldn't have to figure everything out by yourself now. That hurt more than he probably intended. I had run Boswell Flowers for 26 years. I had negotiated leases, paid employees, filed taxes, survived 2 recessions, and once kept the business operating for 11 days after a burst pipe flooded half the shop. Raymond handled some things. I handled others. We were partners. But grief had made me look fragile, and Brandon seemed to have mistaken fragile for incapable. A week after the funeral, Megan arrived carrying a glossy brochure. She placed it beside my tea. Just look at it before you say no. The cover showed 2 silver-haired women laughing beside a swimming pool. What is this, Westbrook Gardens? I looked at her. It's a retirement community. Active senior living, Megan corrected. It's actually gorgeous. I pushed the brochure back. I'm not moving. No one's saying you have to. You brought me a brochure. She gave an uncomfortable laugh. We're exploring options. Brandon entered from the hallway at exactly the wrong moment. Mom, don't make this into something it isn't. I looked from him to his wife. You've been discussing where I'm going to live. He sighed. Of course we've discussed it. You're alone in a 3-bedroom house. I've been alone for 11 days. His face tightened. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He sat across from me. Dad worried about this. Something inside me went still. About what? You staying here by yourself? Raymond never said that to me. He said it to me. I studied my son's face. Brandon had Raymond's eyes. That had always comforted me. That morning it didn't. When a while ago. How long? I don't know, Mom. Maybe last year. And what exactly did he say? Brandon rubbed his forehead. He said if anything happened to him, the house would be too much for you. That didn't sound like Raymond. My husband worried about gutters, property taxes, furnace maintenance, and whether I remembered to lock the shed. But he had never once suggested I couldn't manage our home. He told me he'd want you somewhere easier, Brandon continued. Somewhere safe. I'm safe here. That's not the point. It seems very much like the point. Megan stood. I'm going to make coffee. Neither of us stopped her. Brandon lowered his voice. Mom, you need to start thinking practically. My husband isn't even 2 weeks in the ground. His face changed. For 1 second I saw shame. Then it disappeared. I'm trying to protect you. Then stop trying to move me. I walked upstairs before he could answer. That afternoon I found Raymond's slippers beside our bed. I sat on the mattress holding them against my chest and cried until my ribs hurt. Not because of Brandon. Not entirely. I cried because I suddenly needed Raymond to answer a question only he could answer. Had he really told our son I should leave our home? That night I couldn't sleep. Around 11, I went downstairs for water. The kitchen light was on. I heard voices before I reached the doorway. Brandon and Megan were standing near the back door. They hadn't heard me. We can't keep waiting, Megan whispered. I'm aware of that. Then make her understand. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough. What happens when the payment comes due? Brandon glanced toward the hallway, and I stepped backward into the darkness. His voice dropped. I told you I'll handle it. With what? The house gives us room. My hand tightened around the stair rail. Megan said something too quietly for me to catch. Then Brandon answered, "Once we get the house situation settled, I can deal with the rest." My heart began pounding. This wasn't about my safety. It wasn't about loneliness. It wasn't even about Raymond's supposed wishes. My son needed something, and whatever it was, he believed my house could provide it. I returned upstairs without getting my water. For the first time since Raymond died, grief wasn't the emotion keeping me awake. Suspicion was. The following morning, Brandon behaved as if nothing had happened. He made coffee. He asked whether I'd slept. Then while I stood at the sink, he said casually, "A realtor I know could stop by tomorrow. No commitment, just to tell us what the house might be worth." I turned around. "No." He blinked. "What? No realtor?" "Mom, I'm not selling this house." His jaw tightened. "We don't have to decide today." I just did. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Brandon gave me a look I had never seen from my child before. It wasn't anger exactly, it was frustration. The frustration of someone whose plan had encountered an obstacle. And I was beginning to understand that the obstacle was me. What I didn't know yet was how far my son had already gone, or how much money he believed was waiting on the other side of my surrender. The house he already thought was his. The realtor arrived the next morning at 10:15. I knew the exact time because I was standing at the kitchen sink, staring at the clock above the pantry door when a silver SUV pulled into my driveway. For one foolish second, I thought Brandon had invited a friend. Then a woman stepped out carrying a leather portfolio and a laser measuring device. She looked up at my house the way people look at something they're considering buying. My stomach tightened. Brandon came down the stairs, buttoning his shirt. "You're up early," he said. "Who is that?" He glanced toward the window. "That's Lisa. Lisa who, the realtor I mentioned." I stared at him. "I told you no." "Mom, she's only doing a valuation." "I told you no." Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Brandon walked toward the front door. I stepped in front of him. "Don't open that door." His face hardened. "You're being unreasonable. This is my home, and I'm trying to help you understand what your options are." "I understand my options perfectly well. I'm staying." The bell rang again. Brandon lowered his voice. "She's already here. Don't embarrass me." That sentence did something to me. Not because it was cruel, because it revealed whose discomfort mattered most to him. I moved aside. "Fine." Relief crossed his face. "But I'm going with you." He frowned. "Why?" "Because apparently we're valuing my house." The realtor introduced herself as Lisa Garner. She seemed pleasant enough, and when Brandon told her I was his mother, something uncertain flickered across her face. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Boswell," she said. "Charlene is fine." She opened her portfolio. "Brandon told me you're considering downsizing." "I'm not." Silence. Lisa looked at Brandon. He gave a little laugh. "Mom's still processing everything." My cheeks burned. "There's nothing to process. I am not selling." Lisa closed the portfolio halfway. "I certainly don't want to intrude." "You aren't the one intruding." Brandon's eyes flashed. "Mom." "No. You brought this woman into my house after I specifically told you not to." Lisa cleared her throat. "I can come back another time." Brandon shook his head. "You're here. Let's at least get the numbers." And somehow, despite everything I had said, she stayed. I followed them from room to room. Lisa measured walls. She photographed windows. She examined the hardwood floors and asked about the roof. Every click of her camera felt invasive. In the dining room, she pointed toward the floor. "Original hardwood." "Yes," I said. There was a shallow scratch beneath the table. I remembered Brandon at 11 years old riding his new bicycle through that room on Christmas morning while Raymond shouted that bicycles belonged outside. I almost laughed at the memory. Then Lisa said, "Floors could probably be refinished before listing." Before listing. My memory disappeared. Upstairs, she stepped into my bedroom. "No." Both of them turned. "Please don't photograph this room." Lisa immediately lowered her phone. "Of course." Brandon sighed. Mom, buyers need to see. There are no buyers. I looked at him. And your father's things are still in here. Raymond's watch rested on the dresser. His reading glasses were beside the bed. His navy sweater was folded over the chair because I still hadn't found the courage to put it away. Lisa looked embarrassed. I think I have enough. She left 20 minutes later. Brandon walked her to the driveway. I watched through the window as they talked beside her SUV. She handed him something. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. When he returned, I was waiting. What did she give you? Nothing. Brandon. Preliminary numbers. For the house I'm not selling. He exhaled. Do you know what this place could be worth? I don't care. You should. I care what it means to me. Sentimental value doesn't pay taxes. I stared at him. My taxes are paid. That's not the point. Then tell me the point. He looked away. That was when I knew there was one. Over the next 2 days, Brandon became increasingly comfortable making decisions that weren't his. I found 3 boxes in Raymond's study labeled, Keep, Donate, and Sell. At first I thought Megan had brought them in. Then I saw Brandon placing Raymond's old drafting tools into the sell box. What are you doing? He looked up. Organizing. Put those back. Mom, Dad hasn't used these in years. They were his. Exactly. The word hit me strangely. Were. Past tense. Finished. Disposable. I picked up Raymond's metal drafting compass. He had owned it since before Brandon was born. Once when Brandon was 8, Raymond used that same compass to help him draw a solar system for a school project. You don't get to decide what happens to his things. Brandon stood. Someone has to. I do. Mom, you're keeping everything. It's been 2 weeks. I know, but eventually. Stop saying eventually. He stared at me. Why? Because every time you say it, you're talking about my life as though you're waiting for it to move out of your way. His expression changed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he pushed the cell box aside. Fine. But it wasn't fine. That evening, he placed a document beside my dinner plate. What is this power of attorney? I looked up. For what? So I can help manage things. I haven't asked you to manage anything. It's just practical. I read the first page. The legal language made my head hurt, but I understood enough. The document would give Brandon broad authority to handle financial matters on my behalf. I pushed it back. No. Mom, don't react emotionally. I'm not reacting emotionally. You're overwhelmed. I am grieving. Those are not the same thing. He rubbed his temples. If something happens. Something already happened. Your father died. I didn't. His face went still. I had never spoken to him like that. Neither had I ever needed to. He picked up the document. Think about it. I already have. The next afternoon I heard voices in the living room. Lisa had returned. This time she hadn't rung the bell. Brandon must have let her in. I stopped in the hallway. She was showing him comparable sales on a tablet. If you list around 725, you could generate multiple offers, she said. How quickly could we close? Depends on financing. Cash buyer maybe 3 weeks. My pulse jumped. 3 weeks. Not someday. Not eventually. 3 weeks. Lisa noticed me first. Oh, Charlene. Brandon turned. I looked at him. Why is she here again? Lisa stood immediately. I was just dropping off the market analysis. Brandon said, There's no reason to make this dramatic. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the printed report. At the top were the words, Proposed Listing Strategy. Below that was my address, my home, my life, reduced to square footage bedrooms, and estimated market value. Then I saw something handwritten in the margin. Target listing ASAP after ownership clearance. I looked at Brandon. What does ownership clearance mean? He didn't answer. Lisa looked uncomfortable. I think I should go. This time I didn't stop her. When the door closed, I held up the report. Tell me what's happening. Nothing is happening. Stop lying to me. I'm not lying. You told that woman this house would be available. I said it might be. You asked how quickly you could close. Because I need information. For what? He turned away. I followed him. Brandon. Mom, please. No. You have asked about the deed insurance, my savings, and my will. You brought a realtor here twice. You tried to get me to sign power of attorney. Now you're planning how quickly my house can be sold. He spun around. Because I don't have time. The words exploded out of him. Silence followed. I stared at my son. What do you mean? His shoulders dropped. He walked to the window. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he whispered, "The Chesterfield project went bad." I knew about the project. Brandon and two partners had bought several properties south of Richmond. He had talked about turning them into upscale townhomes. How bad? He laughed without humor. Bad. How much do you owe? It's complicated. How much? He turned toward me. I have loans coming due. How much, Brandon? Enough. My stomach sank. Does Megan know? Of course she knows. Is that what I heard you talking about? His eyes narrowed. When? The other night. He looked away. That was answer enough. You said the house would give you room. I meant time. This house is not yours to use. I know that. Do you? He ran both hands through his hair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Then explain it. I put everything into this project. Everything. If the lenders call the notes, I could lose the business. And selling my house fixes that. I never said I was taking your money. You don't have to say it. You've been planning around it. His face reddened. I thought we were family. So did I. That landed. He stared at me. Then something changed in his expression. Defensiveness hardened into resentment. Dad understood. I froze. What? Dad knew what I was dealing with. When a few years ago. What did you ask him for? Brandon's jaw tightened. That's between me and Dad. Your father is dead and you're trying to sell my home. It stopped being between you and him. He turned toward the hallway. I stepped in front of him. Did Raymond give you money? No. Did you ask him? Brandon didn't answer. That silence told me more than words could have. How much? Mom. How much did you ask your father for? His eyes filled with something I couldn't identify. Anger, shame, maybe both. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He looked past me toward the study where Raymond's belongings were still waiting in those 3 boxes. Then he said quietly, Dad promised I'd be taken care of. The sentence chilled me, not because I believed it, because I knew Raymond. My husband might promise to help our son. He might promise advice, shelter, even another chance. But Raymond had spent our entire marriage teaching Brandon that nobody was entitled to what they hadn't earned. I looked at my son and realized there were now 2 versions of my husband standing between us. The Raymond I had known for 44 years, and the Raymond Brandon claimed had made promises behind my back. Only one of those versions could be true. And for the first time I wondered what else had passed between my husband and my son when I wasn't in the room. The morning he changed the locks. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes I heard Brandon's voice. Dad promised I'd be taken care of. By sunrise I had replayed those words so many times they no longer sounded like a sentence. They sounded like an accusation against a dead man who couldn't defend himself. Raymond and I had disagreed about plenty of things during 44 years of marriage. We argued about money, about Brandon, about whether the thermostat needed to be set at 72 in January. But Raymond believed in responsibility. That was one thing I knew. When Brandon was 16 and backed our station wagon into a mailbox, Raymond made him spend 3 Saturdays helping the neighbor repair the fence around her garden. When Brandon dropped out of a college class because he didn't like the professor, Raymond refused to reimburse the tuition. You can change direction, he told him, but you don't get to send someone else the bill. That was Raymond. So why would he suddenly promise our adult son financial security? At 7:30, I found Brandon in the kitchen. He was scrolling through his phone while drinking coffee from Raymond's favorite mug. I stared at the mug. It was blue ceramic chipped near the handle. Please don't use that. Brandon looked down. What? Your father's mug? He frowned. It's a cup, Mom. No, it was his cup. He placed it on the counter harder than necessary. Fine. I poured myself coffee. We need to talk. We've been talking for 3 days. No, you've been making plans and I've been discovering them afterward. He sighed. Not this again. Yes, this again. I sat at the table. I'm not selling the house. He remained standing. We've established that you don't want to. No, we've established that I'm not going to. Mom, you aren't thinking clearly. There it was again. The quiet suggestion that grief had erased my ability to make decisions. I am thinking very clearly. You're emotionally attached to a building. I'm emotionally attached to my home. That house is worth over $700,000. Then I'm fortunate to own it. His mouth tightened. You're going to sit here alone with that much equity locked in the walls? Yes. Why? Because I live here. He laughed once without humor. Do you even hear yourself? I stood. Do you? His face changed. You have no idea what it takes to maintain this place. I've lived here 31 years. Dad handled everything. No, Brandon. Your father handled the things you noticed. He looked away. I continued. I paid property taxes. I dealt with insurance. I hired contractors. I ran a business for 26 years while raising you. Stop talking to me as if I became incompetent the morning your father died. I never said incompetent. You keep finding prettier words for it. His voice rose. I'm trying to keep you from making a mistake. And I'm trying to keep you from making one. What mistake? Thinking my grief gives you authority over me. Silence. Then Brandon said something I would remember for a long time. Maybe if Dad had prepared you better, I wouldn't have to do this. I stared at him. Do what? Handle things. You aren't handling things. You're trying to take them over. His expression hardened. You want to know the truth, fine. You can't stay frozen forever. Dad is gone. This house needs work. You're 68 years old. Eventually you're going to need help. Eventually is not today. Why wait until there's a crisis? There is a crisis. He stopped. My husband died 13 days ago and my son is measuring my bedroom for strangers. His face reddened. That's unfair. No. What's unfair is having to defend my right to live in my own home while I'm still receiving sympathy cards. He pushed his chair backward. Then do whatever you want. I intend to. He walked out. An hour later, Megan came downstairs with 2 suitcases. Apparently, she and Brandon had decided to return home. I felt relief. Megan paused near the front door. Charlene, nobody is trying to hurt you. Then everybody should stop making decisions for me. She lowered her voice. Brandon is under a lot of pressure. So I've learned. Her eyes flickered. How much did he tell you? Not enough. She looked toward the driveway. Maybe give him some time. I've given him 42 years. That's not what I meant. I know. She carried the suitcases outside. Brandon didn't say goodbye. By noon, the house was quiet. For the first time since Raymond's funeral, I was completely alone. And I discovered something unexpected. The silence didn't frighten me. It hurt. But it belonged to me. I walked through every room. I moved Raymond's drafting tools from Brandon's cell box back into the drawers. I folded the cardboard boxes flat and carried them to the garage. Then I took the power of attorney papers Brandon had left on the counter and placed them inside a kitchen drawer. I didn't tear them up. Something told me I might need to remember exactly what he had asked me to sign. Around 4, Patricia Monroe called. Patricia and I had known each other for almost 30 years. She had been one of the first people to arrive after Raymond died. "How are you doing?" she asked. I laughed weakly. "Do you want the polite answer? Absolutely not." So I told her. Not everything, but enough. The realtor, the house, the debt, the power of attorney. When I finished, Patricia was silent. Then she said, "Come stay with me tonight." "I'm fine here." "I know you are." "Then why should I leave?" "Because you've been fighting for 3 days and probably haven't slept." She was right. I looked toward the staircase. Raymond's absence felt especially heavy as evening approached. "One night," Patricia said. "I'll make dinner. You can sleep. Tomorrow you'll think better." The irony made me smile. Everyone keeps telling me how I should think. I'm telling you to eat. That sounded like Patricia. I packed an overnight bag, Before leaving, I checked the doors twice. Raymond's habit. I spent the evening at Patricia's kitchen table eating chicken pot pie and talking about everything except money. At 10:30, I went to bed in her guest room. I slept almost 7 hours. It was the longest I'd slept since Raymond died. The next morning, Patricia offered to drive me home. I have my car. Call me when you get there. I'm 68, not 16. Then humor an old woman. You're 2 years younger than me. Details. I reached my house shortly before 9. Brandon's SUV was in the driveway. I frowned. I hadn't expected him. I parked beside him, walked to the front door, and inserted my key. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. For a moment, I thought I had the wrong key. I checked. Same brass key I'd used for years. I tried the deadbolt. It wouldn't fit. Then I noticed the lock. It was new. My hands went cold. I knocked. No answer. I rang the bell. A minute later, Brandon opened the door. He didn't look surprised to see me. What happened to the lock? He hesitated. I had it changed. I stared at him. You what? We're having some work done. Give me the new key. Mom, give me the key. He stepped outside and partially closed the door behind him. That small gesture frightened me more than shouting would have. What are you doing? Just calm down. Do not tell me to calm down. Why did you change the locks on my house? We needed access for contractors. You don't change the locks for contractors. The old locks were outdated anyway. Then give me a key. He rubbed his jaw. We should talk first. I looked past him. What have you done? Nothing. I pushed the door. He blocked it. My own son blocked me from entering my own home. Move. Mom, listen. Move, Brandon. You shouldn't be staying here right now. I stared at him. Excuse me. You're too emotional. You can stay with Patricia for a few weeks while we figure things out. He looked away. That was when I noticed the garage door was open. Several cardboard boxes sat inside. My cardigan lay across the top of one. I walked toward them. What is this? Things you'll need. I opened the first box. Clothes, medication, toiletries, a framed photograph of Raymond and me from our 30th anniversary. Someone had packed my life as if I were going on a trip I hadn't agreed to take. I turned around. Did you go through my bedroom? Mom, please. You packed my clothes. I was trying to make this easier. Easier for whom? He said nothing. The humiliation came so suddenly that I almost couldn't breathe. I had changed this man's diapers, sat beside his hospital bed when he had pneumonia at 6, stayed awake waiting for him to come home after his first high school dance, helped pay for college, held him when his first marriage engagement collapsed. And now he was standing between me and my own front door. Are you throwing me out? His eyes shifted. No. Then give me the key. We need time. That's not an answer. I'm trying to protect everybody. From what? He didn't respond. And suddenly I was too tired to fight him on the driveway. I picked up one box. It was heavier than I expected. Something shifted inside. Brandon stepped forward. I'll carry those. Don't touch them. I loaded the boxes into my car myself. The last one had been packed carelessly. A sweater sleeve hung over the edge. I pushed it inside. My fingers touched leather. I moved the sweater. There beneath 2 scarves and an old photo album was Raymond's brown wallet. I hadn't seen it since the hospital. For a moment, everything around me disappeared. I remembered the nurse handing me Raymond's belongings in a clear plastic bag, his wedding ring, his watch, his wallet. I had given the bag to Brandon because I couldn't bear to hold it. Apparently, he'd tossed the wallet into one of my boxes. I picked it up. The leather was worn smooth at the corners from years in Raymond's pocket. I pressed it against my chest. Then I looked back at my son. Brandon was standing in the doorway of the house where I had raised him. Behind him were 31 years of my life. In my hands was one of the last things his father had carried. I didn't know it yet, but Brandon had made one enormous mistake that morning. When he packed my belongings and locked me outside, He had accidentally given me the one thing Raymond had left behind that could lead me to the truth. The card behind his driver's license. I didn't open Raymond's wallet until that night. For almost 9 hours it sat on the dresser in Patricia's guest room like something alive. I kept looking at it every time I passed the doorway. Patricia asked twice whether I wanted to talk about what had happened. Both times I said no. Not because I didn't trust her. I simply didn't know how to describe the feeling of standing outside your own house while your child decided whether you were allowed inside. Anger would have been easier. What I felt was humiliation. Brandon hadn't just changed a lock. He had quietly changed my position in the family. Until Raymond died, I had been his mother. Now I felt like a problem he needed to relocate. Patricia didn't push. She made tomato soup, cut 2 grilled cheese sandwiches in half, and sat across from me at her kitchen table. Eat. I'm not hungry. Neither am I. Eat anyway. I smiled despite myself. That was Patricia's gift. She could make ordinary things feel manageable. After dinner, I called Brandon. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. 20 minutes later, a text arrived. We should both cool down. I'll call tomorrow. I stared at those words. He had locked me out of my home, and somehow we both needed to cool down. I typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Then I turned off my phone. At 10, Patricia went upstairs. I carried Raymond's wallet into the guest room and closed the door. For several minutes, I just held it. The leather still had a faint indentation where Raymond always tucked his thumb when he opened it. I remembered teasing him about carrying too much cash. You know they invented cards, I once told him. And when the machines stop working, you'll all come looking for me, he'd replied. I laughed at the memory. Then I cried. Grief does that. It waits inside ordinary objects. A mug, a sweater, a wallet. And suddenly you're back inside a life that no longer exists. I opened it. The first thing I saw was his driver's license. The photograph had been taken 4 years earlier. Raymond hated it because the clerk had caught him halfway through a blink. Behind it were his health insurance card, an old hardware store rewards card, and 2 credit cards I recognized. There was also a folded $20 bill. Of course, I whispered. Emergency cash. Raymond always carried emergency cash. I almost closed the wallet. Then I noticed another card tucked behind the driver's license. Only one corner was visible. I pulled it free. It was dark blue and slightly faded. Commonwealth Heritage Bank. I frowned. I had never heard Raymond mention that bank. Our checking and savings accounts had been with Virginia Community Credit Union for more than 20 years. Our retirement accounts were elsewhere, but I knew those institutions too. This was different. The card had Raymond's name embossed across the front. Raymond J. Boswell. I turned it over. It was a debit card, expired nearly 3 years earlier. My first thought was almost embarrassingly ordinary. Maybe he'd opened an account years ago and forgotten to close it. Then I noticed a small piece of paper wedged into the slot behind the card. I pulled it out. It had been folded twice. 4 words were written in Raymond's unmistakable block handwriting. Ask for Denise Carter. I read them again, then a third time. There was no phone number, no explanation, just a name. I sat on the edge of the bed. Who is Denise Carter? The room, of course, offered nothing. For the first time since Raymond's death, my grief shifted into something else. Curiosity, then suspicion. Raymond and I had never shared every detail of every day, but financially I believed we had no secrets. We filed taxes together. We discussed major purchases. I knew what his pension paid each month. I knew what we had in retirement accounts. At least I thought I did. So why did my husband have a debit card from a bank I'd never heard of? And why had he hidden a woman's name behind it? For one uncomfortable second, another possibility entered my mind. I hated myself for thinking it. Could Denise Carter have been someone Raymond knew personally? I pushed the thought away. Not because Raymond was incapable of disappointing me. Marriage teaches you that nobody is incapable of anything. But the note didn't feel romantic. It felt instructional. Ask for Denise Carter. Not call Denise. Not tell Denise. Ask for. Like directions. I barely slept. At 7 the next morning, I searched the bank on my laptop. Commonwealth Heritage Bank had several branches around Richmond. One was less than 20 minutes away. I searched Denise Carter. Nothing useful appeared. At 8:30, I dressed in navy slacks, a cream blouse, and the pearl earrings Raymond had given me for our 40th anniversary. I don't know why I dressed carefully. Maybe because the previous morning my son had made me feel powerless. I wanted to look like myself again. Patricia was pouring coffee when I came downstairs. "You're dressed like you're going somewhere important." "I might be." I showed her the card. She examined it. "Raymond's." I nodded. "Do you know this bank?" "No." Then I showed her the note. Patricia looked at me. "Who is Denise Carter?" "That's what I'm going to find out." Her eyebrows rose. "Do you want company?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." This was between Raymond and me. Even if Raymond wasn't here anymore, the bank occupied a brick building near a shopping center in western Richmond. I sat in my car for several minutes before going inside. The card felt strangely heavy in my purse. A young man at the reception desk smiled. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Denise Carter." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "May I ask what it's regarding?" I hesitated. "My husband." He typed something. "What's your husband's name?" "Raymond Boswell." The young man's fingers stopped. It was brief. Maybe I imagined it. "One moment, please." He disappeared through a glass door. A few minutes later, a black woman with short, silver-streaked hair came toward me. She looked to be in her early 60s. "Mrs. Boswell." "Yes." "I'm Denise Carter." Her voice was warm but professional. She extended her hand. When I said Raymond's name, something changed in her expression. Not surprise, recognition. "I'm very sorry for your loss," she said. My throat tightened. "You knew my husband." "I knew him through the bank." "For how long?" She paused. "Why don't we speak privately?" She led me into a small office. I sat across from her desk and removed the old debit card from my purse. The moment she saw it, Denise became very still. "Where did you get that?" "It was in Raymond's wallet." She picked it up carefully. "Do you know what account this belongs to?" "No. That's why I'm here." Denise looked at her computer, then back at me. "I need to be careful about what I can disclose. I'm his wife." "I understand. But banking regulations don't disappear when someone passes away." My frustration rose. "My son has locked me out of my house. My husband is dead, and now I've discovered he had an account I knew nothing about. I would appreciate someone telling me what is happening." Denise's expression softened. "I'm going to help you understand everything you're legally entitled to know." "What do you need?" "Identification, a certified death certificate, and documentation establishing your relationship to Mr. Boswell." I had my driver's license, but nothing else. "I can get those." "Good." I stood, then stopped. "Miss Carter." "Denise is fine." I unfolded Raymond's note and placed it on her desk. She read it. Her eyes lifted to mine. "Did you know he wrote this?" "No." She looked at the handwriting again. "When did he give it to you?" "He didn't. I found it behind the card." Denise leaned back. For several seconds she seemed to be deciding what she was allowed to say. "Please bring those documents back." "That's all." "For now." Something in her tone told me it wasn't all. I returned to Patricia's house, retrieved the certified death certificates from the folder the funeral home had given me, found our marriage certificate in a document box, and drove back. By it was almost noon. Denise was waiting. She photocopied everything and asked me several verification questions. Then she began typing. I watched her face. Her expression changed as she moved through whatever appeared on the screen. Finally, she stopped. "Is something wrong?" "No." "Then what is it?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Boswell, before we discuss the account, there's something I think you should understand." My heartbeat quickened. "What?" She reached for the faded card. "Your husband was very deliberate about keeping this account separate." "Separate from what?" "Your ordinary household banking." "Why?" "I can't answer that yet." "Can't or won't?" "Can't." I leaned back. The room suddenly felt too warm. Did Raymond owe money? No. Was he in trouble? Not that I'm aware of. Then why would he hide a bank account from his wife? Denise folded her hands. I don't believe he was hiding it from you in the way you're imagining. That caught me. What way am I imagining? That he didn't want you to find it. She slid the card back across the desk. I looked down at Raymond's name. Then why didn't he tell me? Denise's expression softened. I can't speak for your husband. She paused. But I can tell you something he said to me. I looked up. Denise glanced toward the closed office door, then back at me. The last time Raymond came into this branch, he asked whether I planned to retire anytime soon. Despite myself, I almost smiled. That sounds like him. I told him I had no immediate plans. What did he say? She took a breath. He said good, because Charlene may need someone she can trust when she finally comes looking. The room went silent. I stared at her. When was this? About 8 months ago. 8 months. Raymond had been healthy 8 months ago. Still mowing the lawn. Still complaining about grocery prices. Still sitting beside me every evening watching the news. My fingers closed around the bank card. He knew I would come here. Denise shook her head slowly. I don't know what Raymond knew. Then she looked directly into my eyes. But he told me you might walk through that door one day carrying this card. A chill moved through me. Until that moment, I had thought I'd stumbled onto something Raymond had forgotten. Now I understood the opposite might be true. The card hadn't been forgotten at all. Raymond had left it where somehow he believed I would eventually find it. And suddenly the question wasn't why my husband had hidden a bank account from me. It was what he had been waiting for me to discover. The account with almost nothing in it. For several seconds after Denise told me Raymond had expected me to come looking, I couldn't speak. I kept staring at the faded debit card between my fingers. 8 months earlier, my husband had walked into that bank while he was still healthy, still driving himself to the hardware store, still arguing with me about whether we needed to replace the dishwasher. And he had mentioned me. Not casually, deliberately. Charlene may need someone she can trust when she finally comes looking. The words disturbed me more than the secret account itself. What did he think I would be looking for? I asked. Denise shook her head. He didn't tell me. Did you ask? I did. And he smiled and said I'd understand if the day ever came. That sounded exactly like Raymond, infuriatingly calm, always convinced that explanations could wait until the right moment. I looked toward Denise's computer. So what is in the account? She hesitated. Then she turned the monitor slightly away while clicking through several screens. Now that we've verified the documentation, I can discuss the account information you're legally entitled to receive. My heart began beating faster. For one ridiculous moment, I imagined a large number. Not millions, nothing dramatic. Maybe $50,000, maybe $100,000. Raymond had quietly set aside in case something happened to him. Given everything Brandon had done, even that amount would have felt like a lifeline. Denise printed a page and placed it in front of me. I looked at the balance. $3.842.17. I blinked. That's it. Denise didn't react. That's the current balance. I almost laughed. All that mystery, the hidden card, the handwritten name. Raymond telling Denise I might come looking. $3,842.17. I leaned back. I don't understand. I know. Was there more? At different times, yes. How much more? Not substantially more in this particular account. My disappointment embarrassed me. I hadn't come there expecting treasure. At least that's what I told myself. But somewhere between Patricia's guest room and Denise's office, I had started hoping Raymond had left me something that would make Brandon powerless. Not because I wanted to punish my son, because I was tired of feeling dependent on everyone else's decisions. I folded my hands. Then why did Raymond care whether I found this account? Denise turned the statement toward herself. I think the balance is the least important thing here. I looked up. What do you mean? This account has unusual activity. My pulse changed. What kind? Not suspicious activity, repetitive activity. She printed several more pages. I pulled them closer. The account history went back years. Deposits appeared irregularly, usually a few $1,000s at a time. But every 3 months, almost like clockwork, a payment left the account. $1, $250. $1, $250. $1, $250. Again and again. The recipient was the same. Whittaker Fiduciary Services. What is that? Denise shook her head. I can't tell you what services they provided your husband. But you know who they are. I know of them. What do they do? They're associated with estate administration and fiduciary services. I stared at the statements. Estate administration. Trusts, certain financial structures, administrative services, things of that nature. The word trust landed differently after everything Brandon had said about inheritance. Did Raymond have a trust? Denise folded her hands. That isn't information I can confirm from this bank account. But these payments went there. Yes. How long? She scrolled. At least 8 years through this account. 8 years. I felt as if someone had removed the floor beneath my chair. Raymond was paying these people for 8 years, quarterly. And I never knew. Denise didn't answer. I ran my finger down the transactions. Every 3 months. Regular, intentional. This wasn't a forgotten account. It was an account with a job. What were the deposits? Mostly transfers. From where? Some originated from an outside institution. Which one? She gave me the name. I didn't recognize it. Can I access that account? Not through us. Is it still open? I can't know that. I rubbed my forehead. Every answer seemed to create 2 new questions. Denise was my husband, living some kind of second financial life. Her expression softened. I wouldn't characterize it that way. How would you characterize it? As a man who kept certain financial arrangements separate from his wife. Yes. That hurt. I looked down. Raymond and I had shared 44 years. Had I mistaken familiarity for complete knowledge? Denise seemed to sense what I was thinking. Charlene, may I say something? I nodded. Whatever Raymond was doing, I never got the impression he was protecting something from you. Then why keep it secret? I can't answer that. You keep saying that. Because I don't want to give you guesses when you need facts. She was right. I hated that she was right. I returned to the transaction history. The most recent payment caught my attention. It had been made 19 days before Raymond died. He was still paying them. Yes. So whatever this was, it was active. It appears so. I looked at the recipient again. Whittaker Fiduciary Services. Do you have their number? I can give you publicly available contact information. She wrote an address and phone number on a piece of bank stationery. The office was in downtown Richmond. I stared at the name, Whittaker. I searched my memory. No Christmas card, no dinner conversation, no story from Raymond's work, nothing. Do you recognize the name Henry Whittaker? Denise asked. I looked at her sharply. Who is that? She paused. I believe he's associated with the firm. Did Raymond meet him? I can't confirm your husband's meetings. But the fact she'd asked told me enough. I picked up the paper. I want to call now. Denise gave me a small nod. You can use the office if you'd like privacy. My hand shook slightly as I dialed. A receptionist answered. Whittaker Fiduciary Services. How may I direct your call? My name is Charlene Boswell. I'm calling regarding my late husband Raymond Boswell. There was a brief pause. I'm sorry for your loss. Do you know who handled Mr. Boswell's account? No, I was given the name Henry Whittaker. Another pause. One moment, please. Soft music replaced her voice. I looked at Denise. She remained quiet. After perhaps 30 seconds, the music stopped. A man's voice came on the line. This is Henry Whittaker. His voice was older, calm, and precise. Mr. Whittaker, my name is Charlene Boswell. Silence. Not static. Not a bad connection. Silence. Mr. Whittaker, I'm here. Did you know my husband? Another pause. Yes, Mrs. Boswell. I knew Raymond. The familiarity unsettled me. Not Mr. Boswell. Raymond. For how long? Quite a few years. I found payments from him to your firm. I see. No, I don't think you do. My husband died and I've discovered a bank account I knew nothing about. Your firm has been receiving money from that account every 3 months for 8 years. His voice softened. I'm very sorry you had to discover it this way. What exactly was he paying you for? I can't discuss the substance of my work with Raymond over the telephone until I've verified your identity and reviewed the relevant documents. I nearly laughed. Everyone keeps verifying me. I was married to the man for 44 years. I understand your frustration. Do you? More than you realize. That stopped me. What does that mean? Henry exhaled slowly. Mrs. Boswell, may I ask you one question? What? How did you find the account? I looked at the faded card. His wallet. Was there anything with it? I glanced at Denise. A note. What did it say? Ask for Denise Carter. Silence again. Then Henry said something quietly. Then he did leave the trail. My skin prickled. The trail to what? I think we should meet. No, I want you to tell me what is happening. I will tell you everything I'm authorized to tell you, but not over the phone. Did Raymond leave money with you? I can't answer that yet. Did he have a trust? Another pause. Mrs. Boswell, please bring your identification, Raymond's certified death certificate, and any estate documents currently in your possession. When? I can see you tomorrow morning. I don't want to wait until tomorrow. Then come at 4 today. I looked at the clock. It was just after 1. I'll be there. Before I could hang up, Henry spoke again. Mrs. Boswell. Yes. His voice changed. The professional distance disappeared. I'm sorry Raymond didn't have the chance to explain this himself. My throat tightened. So am I. There is something else you should know before you come. I gripped the phone. What? I don't want you assuming this arrangement was created recently. How old is it? The current structure dates back several years. How many? He hesitated. Nearly 8. The same period as the quarterly payments. I closed my eyes. 8 years of birthdays. 8 anniversaries. 8 Christmas mornings. 8 years of Raymond sitting across from me at breakfast, while this unknown arrangement existed somewhere beyond our ordinary life. Why didn't he tell me? Henry's answer came quietly. That is one of the things he asked me to explain if you ever contacted me. If, not when. I opened my eyes. Mr. Whitaker, did Raymond know he was going to die? No. Then why prepare for me to call? A long pause followed. When Henry finally spoke, his voice was almost gentle. Because this wasn't about Raymond expecting to die, Mrs. Boswell. I felt cold. What was it about? I think Raymond was waiting to see whether you would ever need what he had put in place. Need it because of what? Henry didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, I'll explain when you arrive. I almost ended the call in frustration. Then he added one final sentence. And Charlene. It was the first time he'd used my first name. Yes. I've been expecting this call for almost 8 years. The line went quiet after we said goodbye. I sat there holding the phone. Denise watched me carefully. What did he say? I looked down at the transaction statements. $3,842. That was all the mysterious account contained. But suddenly I understood that the account itself had never been the secret. It was a doorway. Raymond had kept it open for 8 years, paying the same amount every quarter, leaving behind a card and one carefully chosen name. And whatever waited on the other side had been prepared long before my son ever changed the locks on my house. The lawyer, my husband, never mentioned. At 3:45 that afternoon, I was sitting in the lobby of Whitaker Fiduciary Services with Raymond's death certificate in my purse and a knot in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. The office occupied the 4th floor of an old brick building in downtown Richmond. There were no marble floors, no grand paintings, nothing that suggested enormous wealth passed through those rooms. Everything was quiet, private, deliberate. Exactly the kind of place Raymond would have chosen. At 4, a receptionist opened a wooden door. "Mrs. Boswell, Mr. Whitaker is ready for you." Henry Whitaker stood when I entered. He was tall, thin, probably around 70, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a dark gray suit without a tie. He extended his hand. "Charlene." I shook it. "You already seem to know who I am." "I do." "That makes one of us." His expression tightened slightly. "I understand." "No, Mr. Whitaker, I don't think you do." I placed my purse beside the chair. "My husband died less than 2 weeks ago. My son has changed the locks on my house. This morning I discovered Raymond had been paying your firm for 8 years." Henry remained standing. "And everyone I speak to knows something about my husband that I apparently didn't." He nodded slowly. "You have every right to be angry." "I'm not sure what I am." "That's fair." He gestured toward the chair. "Please." I sat. Henry returned behind his desk, but didn't immediately open any files. "Before we discuss Raymond's affairs, I need to verify several things." I almost laughed. "Of course you do. I know you've already done this at the bank. Twice." "I promise I'm not trying to make this harder." I handed him my identification, our marriage certificate, and Raymond's certified death certificate. He reviewed everything carefully. Then he asked whether I had a copy of Raymond's will. "At home." Henry looked up. "Can you access it?" The question embarrassed me. My son changed the locks. His expression sharpened. "With your permission." "No." "Whose name is on the property?" "Mine and Raymond's." "Do you know how title is held?" "No." Henry made a note. "We'll come back to that." "I didn't come here about the house." "No. But I suspect eventually we'll need to discuss it." There was something about the way he said eventually that made me uneasy. He opened a thick file. Raymond Boswell was printed on the tab. Seeing my husband's name on a stranger's confidential folder hurt more than I expected. "How long did you know him?" I asked. "Professionally, almost 11 years. 11. I stared at him. 11 years? Yes. And he never mentioned you once. Henry removed his glasses. Raymond was extremely private about financial matters. Not with me. Henry didn't respond. That silence felt like disagreement. I leaned forward. Was my husband hiding money from me? No. Then what was he hiding? A structure. What does that mean? Raymond established an estate planning arrangement involving assets he kept separate from your ordinary household finances. What assets will get there? No. My voice was sharper than I intended. I have spent all day hearing that. We'll get there. Not yet. Bring another document. Verify another identity. Raymond was my husband. I need somebody to start telling me the truth. Henry studied me for a moment. Then he closed the file. You're right. I waited. Raymond created a trust. The word felt strangely small. What kind of trust? A private trust, designed primarily for your benefit and protection. I blinked. My protection from what? Henry didn't answer immediately. Before I explain that Raymond instructed me to give you something if you ever came here under these circumstances. He unlocked a drawer. From inside, he removed a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front. Charlene. Raymond's handwriting. My breath caught. I didn't reach for it. When did he write that? 6 years ago. My eyes filled instantly. Did he change it later? No. Did he know you kept it? He gave it to me for exactly this purpose. My fingers trembled as I took the envelope. For a moment I couldn't open it. The last note Raymond had written me before his death had been stuck to the refrigerator. Pick up milk. Love you. I still had it in my purse. Now I was holding words he had written 6 years earlier, for a future he apparently imagined without himself in it. I broke the seal. Charlene. If you're reading this, then I am probably not sitting beside you to explain it, and for that I am sorry. I stopped. Henry looked away, giving me privacy. I continued. There are things I should have told you sooner. I didn't keep them from you because I didn't trust you. I kept them separate because I know your heart, and I know how quickly you will sacrifice your own security for someone you love. My vision blurred. That sounded like Raymond. Not elegant, not poetic, just painfully direct. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. What I put in place was never meant to change our life. Our life was already enough for me. But there came a time when I began to worry that what we had built together was being viewed differently by someone we loved. I stopped again. Someone. I already knew who. The next line confirmed it. I love Brandon. Nothing written here changes that. My chest tightened. But loving our son does not require pretending I haven't seen what money is doing to him. I lowered the letter. What did Raymond see? Henry folded his hands. Keep reading. I did. Over the years, Brandon has started talking about our property and savings less as things belonging to us and more as things he expects to inherit. Maybe he doesn't realize he's doing it. Maybe I noticed because he spoke more openly to me than he did to you. I felt sick. Raymond had noticed, and I hadn't. Or perhaps I had noticed and kept translating Brandon's behavior into something kinder. Ambition, stress, concern, anything except entitlement. The letter continued. You will want to help him. That is one of the reasons I love you. But there is a difference between helping someone stand and letting them use you as the ground beneath their feet. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Raymond had been dead 13 days. Yet for the first time since the hospital I could hear him. Not his voice exactly. His thinking. His stubborn, careful way of protecting me without asking whether I wanted protection. My sadness mixed with anger. Why didn't he tell me? Henry looked at me. He believed you would confront Brandon. Of course I would have. Exactly. And what's wrong with that? Raymond thought Brandon would deny everything, and then you'd feel forced to choose between believing your husband and believing your son. He didn't have the right to make that decision for me. No. Henry said it immediately. That surprised me. No. Raymond was my client. He was also my friend. I respected him, but that doesn't mean every choice he made was perfect. I looked back at the letter. Then why help him hide this? I helped him establish a lawful estate plan. I also encouraged him more than once to tell you. That mattered. Not enough to remove the hurt, but enough to make Henry feel less like a conspirator. I finished the final paragraph. If this arrangement turns out to have been unnecessary, I will be grateful to have worried for nothing. But if the day comes when you feel pressured, cornered, or made to believe that loving your family requires surrendering your independence, I want you to have choices. Always choose with your own mind, Charlene. I have trusted it for 44 years. Love, Raymond. I folded the letter carefully. For several moments, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the air conditioner. He wrote 44 years. Henry nodded. He revised that line when he gave me the final envelope. I laughed through my tears. Of course he did. Then something struck me. If this letter is 6 years old, why did you say you've been expecting my call for almost 8? Because the trust began earlier. The letter came later. What happened in between? Henry's expression changed. This was the part he'd been preparing to tell me. He opened the file again. Raymond first came to me because he had assets he wanted organized properly. At that point, his concern was ordinary estate planning. And then Brandon approached him. I sat straighter. About money. Yes. How much? We'll discuss the exact amount. Was this about his current business? No, it happened 3 years ago. That matched what Brandon had hinted at. What did he ask Raymond for? Henry removed another folder from the file. Before we get to the request itself, you need to understand something. What? Raymond didn't immediately refuse to help Brandon. That surprised me. He considered it very seriously. Then what changed? Brandon changed the request. I felt my stomach tighten. From what to what? Henry opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails and handwritten notes. He didn't give them to me yet. Your son originally asked his father for a private loan. How much? Henry met my eyes. $450,000. The number stunned me. 450,000? Yes, I almost stood. Raymond had that kind of money. Henry didn't answer. And suddenly I realized I had asked the wrong question. If Raymond had created a trust and maintained it for 8 years, then perhaps $450,000 wasn't the impossible number I thought it was. What happened? I asked. Raymond declined. Why? He reviewed the project and believed the risk was too high. I thought of Brandon's current failed development. Apparently, this pattern hadn't started recently. Did Brandon accept that? Henry's expression told me the answer. No. What did he do? He came back with another proposal. What proposal? Henry turned one document toward himself, confirming something. Then he looked at me. He asked Raymond to guarantee the loan instead. Using what? Henry paused. That pause frightened me. Your house. For a second, I genuinely didn't understand. My house. Brandon wanted Raymond to use your Richmond property as collateral. I stared at him. The house where we'd raised Brandon. The house Brandon had just tried to sell. My hands went cold. Did Raymond agree? No. Did he tell Brandon he couldn't because my name was on it? Among other reasons. I felt anger rising. Then why didn't Raymond tell me? Because of what Brandon said when Raymond refused. I stopped. What did he say? Henry pulled a handwritten page from the folder. I wasn't present for the conversation. Raymond documented it afterward. Tell me. Henry hesitated. Charlene, tell me. He looked directly at me. According to Raymond's notes, Brandon became angry and said there was no reason to protect the house from him because eventually it would belong to him anyway. The room seemed to shrink. Eventually. There was that word again. The same word Brandon had used with me. The same assumption. The same house. Only now I understood that my son's behavior after Raymond's death wasn't something grief had created. It had started years earlier. Raymond had seen it. He had warned himself about it. And instead of telling me he had built something quietly in the background, something meant to give me choices, if Brandon ever stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as the person standing between him and an inheritance. Henry closed the folder. There's more. I looked at him. More than asking his father to risk our house. Yes. What? Henry placed the folder on the desk between us. Before we discuss what's actually inside Raymond's trust, you need to understand what happened after he refused Brandon. My heart pounded. What happened? Henry's voice became very quiet. Raymond changed his entire estate plan, the loan. Raymond never told me about. For a long moment I stared at Henry Whitaker without saying anything. Raymond changed his entire estate plan. Those words carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. Until that afternoon, I had thought estate planning meant wills, beneficiaries, signatures, and instructions people prepared because they knew they wouldn't live forever. I had never imagined it could also be a response to fear. Fear of your own child. What exactly did Raymond change? I asked. Henry rested one hand on the folder. First, you need the complete story of what happened with Brandon. You told me he wanted $450,000. Initially. And when Raymond refused, Brandon wanted our house used as collateral. Yes, I shook my head. Why would he need that much money? Henry pulled out a document. 3 years ago, Brandon was involved in a development project in Henrico County. A small commercial property was supposed to be converted into a mixed-use development. I vaguely remembered it. Brandon had described it as his first opportunity to move beyond ordinary residential sales. At Thanksgiving that year, he'd spent nearly an hour explaining how developers made money, while everyone else merely bought buildings from them. Raymond had listened quietly. I remembered thinking he looked proud. Now I wondered what he'd actually been thinking. The project ran into permitting delays, Henry continued. Then one of Brandon's partners withdrew. And Brandon lost money. He was facing a substantial loss. How substantial? Enough that he believed another capital injection could save the deal. So he went to Raymond. Yes. Why not me? Henry's expression softened. I think you know. Because I would have asked questions. Because $450,000 wasn't an amount you casually requested over coffee, and perhaps because Brandon suspected I didn't know his father had access to that kind of money. I leaned forward. Did Brandon know about the trust? No. Then why ask Raymond for nearly $500,000? Raymond had helped him financially before. My heart sank. How much? Smaller amounts, nothing remotely comparable. I thought back through the years. A down payment, Brandon said he'd saved. A business expense he claimed had been covered by a commission. A period when he and Megan had struggled, then suddenly seemed comfortable again. Raymond gave him money without telling me. At times. I closed my eyes. The hurt came in layers. Brandon's entitlement was one thing. Raymond deciding what I could and couldn't handle was another. How could he do that? Henry didn't defend him. I think Raymond believed he was preserving peace. Secrets don't preserve peace. No. They postpone the argument. Sometimes. I looked at him sharply. And sometimes they make the argument worse. Henry nodded. I agree. That simple admission kept me from turning my anger on him. I opened my eyes. What happened when Brandon asked for the $450,000? Raymond requested the project documents. That sounded exactly like him. He reviewed them, every page. I almost smiled. Raymond once spent 40 minutes comparing warranties before buying a toaster. Of course, he would review a development proposal. His conclusion was that Brandon wasn't asking for an investment. He was asking Raymond to absorb risk that lenders and other investors had already decided was too high. And Raymond said no. Yes. Then came the house. Henry nodded. Brandon returned several days later with a different proposal. He suggested Raymond guarantee financing secured against your property. Without asking me. Raymond pointed that out. What did Brandon say? Henry hesitated. I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. He suggested you didn't need to be involved in every financial detail. A bitter laugh escaped me. Apparently the men in my family agreed on that. Henry looked uncomfortable. Charlene, no, it's true. I stood and walked toward the window. Richmond traffic moved below us. People were leaving offices, picking up children, going to grocery stores. Ordinary lives. That morning, I had believed my biggest problem was being locked out of my house. Now I was discovering conversations about that house had been happening years before I knew there was anything to defend. Did Raymond ever consider using the house? No. Not even briefly. According to everything he told me, absolutely not. I turned. Why? Because it wasn't solely his to risk. My throat tightened. At least Raymond had understood that. Henry continued. He told Brandon the house represented your security as much as his. And that's when Brandon said it would eventually be his. Yes. I returned to the chair. What happened next? Raymond came to see me. Immediately. 2 days later. Henry opened another section of the file. He was angry, but more than that, he was frightened. Raymond wasn't easily frightened. I know. That was the first time Henry sounded less like an attorney and more like a man remembering a friend. He told me something had shifted in the way Brandon viewed both of you. I looked down. He was right. Raymond wasn't sure. That's important. What do you mean? He didn't decide Brandon was a bad person. He worried Brandon was becoming financially desperate enough to rationalize things he would once have considered wrong. That distinction sounded like Raymond too. He could be furious with someone without reducing them to their worst decision. What did he want you to do? Review his estate plan. And I did. Henry pulled several documents from the folder. At the time, much of Raymond's estate would have passed through fairly conventional arrangements. You were already protected as his spouse, but there were assets outside your ordinary household finances that required more careful planning. What assets? We'll discuss those next. There it was again, the unanswered question, but this time I let him continue. Raymond wanted to make sure Brandon could never pressure you into giving up control simply because he believed an inheritance was waiting. So he cut Brandon out. Not exactly. What does that mean? It means Raymond stopped treating inheritance as something automatic. I thought about that. Did he change his will? Yes. Did he move money? Yes. Where it into structures Brandon couldn't access or control? The trust. Did he move money? Yes. Where it into structures Brandon couldn't access or control? The trust. Primarily, I swallowed. And I'm the beneficiary. You are the primary beneficiary. My pulse quickened. How much is in it? Henry looked at me. We aren't there yet. I almost protested, but something in his expression stopped me. You said Raymond changed everything because of Brandon. Yes. Why not simply tell him he wasn't getting anything? Because Raymond didn't want revenge. That surprised me. Henry continued. He wanted protection for you and accountability for Brandon. Those are different things. I thought of my son standing in my doorway refusing to give me a key. Protection. The word no longer sounded dramatic. It sounded necessary. Did Raymond ever speak to Brandon about changing the estate plan? No. So Brandon still thinks whatever Dad owned would eventually come to him. Most likely. Suddenly the realtor made even more sense, the urgency, the power of attorney. The way Brandon spoke about the house as if I were merely delaying its transfer. Does Brandon know the house isn't his? Legally, he should know he doesn't own it. That's not what I asked. Henry understood. Raymond told me Brandon seemed convinced that eventually was the same as entitled. I looked away. Eventually. Again. What else did Raymond do? Henry slid a document toward me. I didn't understand most of the language, but I recognized my name. Charlene Boswell. Then another. Raymond Boswell Family Trust. The date was 3 years earlier. This was signed after the argument, several weeks afterward. I touched the paper. So the trust existed before? An earlier version did. Raymond substantially restructured it after what happened with Brandon. What changed? Control, beneficiaries, distribution rules, protections. Protections against Brandon. Against anyone attempting to pressure you. I looked up. Did Raymond really think our son might do that? Henry didn't answer. He didn't need to. Brandon already had. I thought about the power of attorney papers, the realtor, the changed locks, my belongings in cardboard boxes. Raymond had feared a possibility. I had lived it. For the first time, my anger toward my husband softened. It didn't disappear. I still wished he had trusted me with the truth, but I began to understand what he had been trying to build around me. Not a prison, a wall, one he hoped I would never need. Henry, I need to know something. Of course. If Brandon hadn't behaved this way, would I ever have found out? Eventually, yes. Raymond's death would trigger certain notifications and administrative steps. Then why the bank card? Henry smiled faintly. Raymond didn't trust paperwork to arrive before family pressure did. I almost laughed. That was so painfully like him that tears filled my eyes. He thought of everything. Not everything. No, he didn't think he'd die before explaining it himself. That silenced me. Henry gave me a moment. Then I asked the question that had been waiting since Denise showed me those quarterly payments. What was Raymond protecting? Henry's expression became more serious. An asset that began as something relatively modest many years ago. What kind of asset? An ownership interest. In what? A development company. I frowned. Raymond was an engineer. How was? He never owned a development company. Not in the way you're imagining. Henry reached for another folder thicker than the others. More than 30 years ago, Raymond performed engineering work for a small company that couldn't fully pay him. I stared at him. So what did they do? They offered him equity. And he accepted yes. How much was it worth? At the time, not very much. And now? Henry rested his hand on the folder. For the first time since I entered his office, he seemed almost reluctant to continue. That's what we need to discuss next. I looked at the thickness of the documents. My heart began beating faster. Is this why Brandon asked Raymond for $450,000? Brandon knew his father had done well financially. But he didn't know about this. No. Do I? Henry met my eyes. Not yet. He opened the folder. Inside were decades of statements, corporate records, merger documents, and valuations. I couldn't understand them from where I sat. But I understood one thing. Whatever Raymond had hidden from me hadn't begun with Brandon. It had begun long before Brandon was old enough to think about inheritance. And after our son asked him to risk our home, Raymond had taken that old secret and placed it behind legal walls designed to protect me. Henry turned the first document toward me. Charlene, to understand what your husband left behind, we have to go back more than 30 years. I looked down at Raymond's signature. The date was from a time when Brandon was still a child, and I was still working 6 days a week at the flower shop. A time when I thought Raymond and I were counting every dollar together. Apparently, somewhere inside those ordinary years, my husband had made one decision neither of us could have imagined would someday change everything. What Raymond had been building for 30 years. The first document Henry placed in front of me was dated May 1993. I recognized the year immediately. Brandon had been 9. Boswell Flowers had been open less than 3 years, and I was still terrified every time the electric bill arrived. Raymond and I had been living carefully then, very carefully. We clipped coupons, we packed lunches, we postponed vacations. When the washing machine broke that summer, Raymond spent 2 evenings on the laundry room floor trying to repair it because we didn't want to spend $400 on a new one. Yet the paper in front of me suggested that during those same years, something else had been happening. "What am I looking at?" I asked. Henry turned the document around. An agreement between Raymond and a company called Piedmont Land Development. The name meant nothing to me. Should I recognize that? Probably not. What did Raymond do for them? Engineering consulting, site evaluations, drainage plans, infrastructure analysis. The company was small at the time. I studied Raymond's signature. Why do you have this? Because it became the beginning of the asset held through his trust. I looked up. Henry opened another file. In the early 90s, Piedmont Land Development acquired several parcels outside Richmond. The company had ambition but very little cash. That sounds dangerous. It was. And Raymond worked for them anyway. He did. I smiled faintly. That also sounds like Raymond. He had always been drawn to complicated problems. Give him a leaking faucet and he'd complain for an hour. Give him a set of engineering plans everyone else thought impossible and he'd forget to eat dinner. Henry continued. Piedmont owed Raymond a substantial amount for his work. Then financing collapsed. How substantial? A little over $32,000. I nearly laughed. In 1993, yes. That was enormous money to us. I imagine it was. It wasn't imaginary. My voice sharpened before I could stop it. $32,000 could have paid years of expenses at my shop. Henry nodded. Raymond knew that. Then why didn't he tell me? He may have told you part of it. I searched my memory, and suddenly something surfaced. A summer evening. Raymond sitting at our kitchen table with his sleeves rolled up. He had told me a client couldn't pay everything they owed. I remembered being furious. Wait, Henry watched me. I knew somebody owed him money. Possibly Piedmont. He told me they worked out a settlement. They did. I looked at the agreement again. What settlement? Piedmont couldn't pay Raymond in cash, so the founder offered him a small ownership interest instead. Stock, essentially. How much? Just under 4% at the time. I stared at him. 4% of a company that couldn't pay its bills. Henry smiled slightly. That's probably how Raymond viewed it too. So he accepted worthless shares instead of $32,000. Not worthless, but highly speculative. I shook my head. If he had told me that, I would have killed him. Henry actually laughed. Raymond said something very similar. That stopped me. He talked about me. Often. What did he say? That if you knew he'd accepted equity instead of cash, you'd remind him of it every time something broke in the house. Despite everything, I laughed. A real laugh. It surprised me so much that tears immediately followed. For a moment, Henry let me cry. I wiped my face. So he never told me because he thought the investment might fail. Initially, yes. What happened? Piedmont survived. Henry placed another document in front of me. By the late 90s, several parcels they had purchased increased substantially in value. They developed retail properties, sold some land, retained other assets. And Raymond kept his ownership. Yes. He never sold, not then. Why? According to Raymond, the distributions weren't significant enough at first to change your lives, and he believed the company still had room to grow. I stared at the dates. Years I remembered through entirely different events. Brandon graduating high school, my mother's death, our 25th wedding anniversary, the expansion of my flower shop. Raymond had apparently been receiving financial statements during all of it. Did the company ever pay him? Yes. Eventually there were distributions. Where did the money go? Mostly back into investments. I looked at him. Raymond reinvested it. Almost all of it. Without telling me. Henry paused. Yes. That old anger returned. People keep describing this as though it's romantic. My husband's secretly building something for me. I don't think Raymond expected you to see it that way. Good. I pushed the document away. Because right now it feels like he made decisions involving our financial life without me. Henry nodded. That's fair. I appreciated that he didn't try to polish the truth. He should have told you, Henry said. I told him that myself. When? More than once. What did he say? That once he told you it would become part of your shared life. It was part of our shared life. Legally and emotionally, I understand your point. But Raymond didn't. He believed there was a distinction between money your household depended on and an investment he considered uncertain. I looked down at the papers. He was wrong. Perhaps. That perhaps irritated me, but I let it go. What happened to Piedmont? Henry pulled out a chart. Over the next 2 decades, it expanded. The chart showed corporate names connected by lines. Piedmont Land Development became Piedmont Commercial Holdings. Then came partnerships, subsidiaries, property entities. I recognized some locations: shopping centers outside Richmond, office buildings near Short Pump, a warehouse complex near Interstate 95. Raymond owned part of all this, through his original interest and subsequent restructuring, yes. I stared at the page. But we weren't rich. Henry gave me a curious look. You weren't. I ran a flower shop. Raymond drove the same Buick for 12 years. That doesn't answer the question. It does to me. Henry leaned back. Charlene, wealth doesn't always look like spending. I thought about our house, our modest vacations, Raymond repairing things rather than replacing them. The years I'd worried about retirement. How much did he have? We're getting there. I sighed. You really enjoy saying that. Occupational hazard. I almost smiled. Henry continued through the records. In 2008, during the financial crisis, Piedmont nearly collapsed again. Raymond had refused to sell his interest. Later, the company recovered. In 2014, a regional investment group purchased a controlling stake. Raymond's original percentage changed through restructuring, but his holdings became more valuable. Did Brandon know any of this? No. Did anyone in the family? Not to my knowledge. Why did Raymond come to you 11 years ago? Because the asset had become valuable enough that ignoring estate planning would have been irresponsible. How valuable? Henry glanced at a document. At that point, roughly $1.5 million. I stopped breathing for a second. $1.5 million, approximately. 11 years ago. Yes. I thought of the arguments Raymond and I had around that time. Not serious arguments. Ordinary marriage arguments. I once spent 3 weeks convincing him we could afford a new refrigerator. He had $1.5 million in an investment. You see why I'm angry? I do. He let me worry. Yes. He watched me calculate whether we could afford things. Yes. I stared at Henry. And you still liked him? Henry smiled sadly. Raymond wasn't perfect, Charlene. No. But he wasn't enjoying your worry either. He genuinely believed the money wasn't real until the asset was liquid. That's an engineer's answer. Raymond was an engineer. That made me laugh again. I hated that Henry was making me understand my husband when I wanted permission to be furious with him. Maybe both were possible. Henry turned another page. After Brandon approached Raymond 3 years ago, the purpose changed. The trust. Yes, before that Raymond mainly wanted efficient estate planning. After Brandon asked him to risk your home, Raymond wanted stronger protection around the asset. For me. For you. And Brandon still didn't know. No. I looked at the corporate chart. If he knew his father had even $1.5 million, he would have behaved differently. Raymond believed so. That sentence chilled me. Because Megan had already changed her tone when she thought my house might be worth $700,000. What would they do if they knew there was more? How did the investment get from $1.5 million to whatever it is now? Henry removed a newer document. Last year, a national real estate group began negotiations to acquire most of Piedmont Commercial Holdings. Raymond knew. Yes. Was the deal completed before he died? Henry shook his head. The final closing occurred afterward. So he never knew exactly what his share became. He knew the projected range. I looked at Raymond's signature on the older papers. What was the projected range? Henry didn't answer. Instead, he placed a thick valuation report on the desk. The cover displayed a date from the previous week. My heart started beating faster. Is that the final number? It's the final post-acquisition valuation of the assets attributable to Raymond's trust, subject to taxes, expenses, and several adjustments. I reached toward it. Henry placed his hand gently on the report. Before you see it, there's something I want you to remember. What? Whatever number is on this page, you are still the woman who walked into my office this afternoon. I stared at him. Why would you say that? Because Raymond worried money could distort people. Brandon. Yes, Henry paused. But he also worried it could frighten you. I almost laughed. I don't frighten easily. Raymond said the same thing. Then show me. Henry removed his hand. I opened the report. There were columns of numbers I didn't understand. Asset values, tax reserves, securities, cash equivalents, adjustments. My eyes moved downward. Then I found the line Henry had marked. Net estimated trust value. I looked at the number, then looked again. My mind refused to process it. I counted the digits. Once, twice. I closed the report. I think there's a mistake. There isn't. I opened it again. The number was still there. My mouth went dry. All I could think about was Brandon standing in my doorway, telling me I shouldn't live alone because I couldn't manage my own life. I thought about my clothes packed into cardboard boxes, the new locks, the realtor measuring my rooms. And then I thought about Raymond sitting at our kitchen table 33 years earlier, accepting a nearly worthless ownership interest because a struggling company couldn't pay his engineering bill. One decision, 33 years, a secret investment, a trust my son didn't know existed. And now printed quietly on a page in front of me was a number so large that I couldn't make myself say it aloud. Henry waited. Finally, I whispered, Raymond did all of this. Henry shook his head gently. He made one decision a long time ago, Charlene. Then he had the patience not to destroy it. I stared at the report again. The number was just under $7 million. And suddenly the man I thought I had known completely had left me with one final truth, large enough to change everything. $7 million. I stared at the number until it stopped looking like money. $6,947.310. At first it was only a row of digits. Then my mind began trying to attach ordinary things to it. Mortgage payments, groceries, property taxes, the $27 blouse I once returned because Raymond and I had agreed to tighten our budget that month, nearly $7 million. I looked at Henry. Say it. He frowned slightly. Say what? The number. He seemed to understand why I needed to hear it from someone else. The current estimated net value of the assets held for your benefit is approximately $6.9 million. I laughed. It came out wrong. Half disbelief, half panic. That's impossible. It isn't. We don't have $7 million. Henry chose his words carefully. You didn't have $7 million sitting in a checking account. Don't do that. Do what? Use lawyer language to make this sound normal. A faint smile touched his face. There's nothing normal about discovering this in one afternoon. I looked back at the valuation. After taxes, estimated reserves and anticipated obligations have already been factored into that figure. The final amount may move somewhat. Somewhat. Market values change. There are administrative expenses. So I shouldn't become attached to the 18,000. That made Henry laugh. And somehow hearing laughter in that room broke something inside me. I started crying. Not the quiet tears I'd shed while reading Raymond's letter. I bent forward and covered my face. Henry didn't speak. I cried because Raymond was dead. Because he had known. Because I hadn't. Because my son had locked me out of a house worth a fraction of the money, now sitting behind legal walls with my name attached to it. And because the only person I wanted to turn to and say, "Can you believe this was the man who had created the secret?" I would give every dollar back, I whispered. Henry remained silent. If Raymond could walk through that door, they could keep all of it. I know. I looked up. No, you don't. His expression changed. You're right, I don't. I wiped my face. Why didn't he tell me when the company became valuable? Henry folded his hands. I asked him that. What did he say? He said the first time it became worth enough to matter, he became afraid that telling you would make it part of your everyday life. It was part of our life whether I knew it or not. I agree. He watched me worry about money. Yes. He let me think our retirement depended on my shop, his pension, and what we'd saved. Yes. Anger rose again. I need you to stop making Raymond sound noble. I'm not. That surprised me. Henry leaned forward. Your husband made a decision he believed was protective. That doesn't mean it was fair to you. I looked at him. He loved you. He also made choices on your behalf without your consent. Both things can be true. That was harder to hear than a defense would have been, because it gave me permission to love Raymond and still be angry with him. Did he ever plan to tell me yes? When, after the acquisition became certain, I glanced at the report. So recently. Very recently. Did he say how? Henry smiled faintly. He joked that he would need to take you somewhere public so you couldn't throw anything at him. A laugh escaped through my tears. That sounds like him. He also said you'd be furious. He knew me. He did. I looked again at the figure. Nearly $7 million. What exactly do I own? Henry began explaining. Some assets were now cash after the acquisition. Others remained in securities and investment accounts. The trust structure provided professional administration while giving me substantial control as the primary beneficiary. I listened carefully. For the first time in 2 weeks, I forced myself to think beyond grief. Can Brandon access any of this? No. Can he challenge it? Anyone can attempt litigation. That doesn't mean they have a valid claim. Is he a beneficiary? Henry paused. Not directly in the way you're asking. What does that mean? Raymond created a separate provision concerning Brandon. How much? We'll discuss that when appropriate. I gave him a tired look. There you go again. This part matters, Charlene. Why? Because Raymond did not want you making decisions about Brandon while you're angry. I sat back. He actually said that more than once. I could almost hear Raymond. Don't decide when you're mad, Charlie. I was the only person who called me Charlie. My throat tightened. Did he cut Brandon out because of the loan? No. Then why isn't Brandon a normal beneficiary? Because Raymond believed giving him unrestricted access to a large inheritance would make his problems worse. I thought about the Chesterfield development, the overdue payment Megan had mentioned, the urgency surrounding my house. Raymond knew Brandon was still in trouble. He suspected the pattern hadn't changed. But he didn't know about the current project. Not all the details. I looked toward the window. Brandon thinks he's waiting for an inheritance. Yes. And he doesn't know the largest part of his father's estate isn't even going through the process he's watching. Correct. Something about that was both satisfying and deeply sad. I didn't want to enjoy my son's ignorance, but I remembered him standing between me and my front door. You shouldn't be staying here right now. He had believed I was powerless. Maybe worse, he had needed me to be powerless. Does the trust mean I don't need the house financially? Henry raised an eyebrow. Not remotely. I laughed despite myself. It was the first uncomplicated laugh I'd had since Raymond died. Then it faded. What am I supposed to do with $7 million? Nothing today. That's your professional advice. Absolutely. He closed the valuation report. Go home. I stared at him. I can't. His expression hardened as he remembered. The locks. Yes. Then go to Patricia's. You remembered her name. Raymond mentioned her. Of course he did. Sleep, eat something. Don't buy anything. Don't promise anyone anything. And don't tell Brandon about this yet. That last instruction caught me. Why not? Because you need to understand your legal position before introducing $7 million into an already volatile family situation. My legal position regarding the house. Among other things. I thought about Brandon's power of attorney document. Could he have used that paper to take control of the trust? Not the way this trust is structured. What about my other accounts? Depending on the powers granted potentially. A chill moved through me. I almost signed it. But you didn't. No. Good. Henry reached for another file. There's something else you should know. My stomach tightened. What now? Your son has already begun making inquiries concerning Raymond's estate. What kind of inquiries? His attorney contacted my office yesterday. I stared at him. His attorney. Yes. Brandon has an attorney. Apparently. What did he ask? Whether my firm represented Raymond in estate matters, and whether there were assets outside the will. My pulse quickened. Did you tell him? No. Does he know about the trust? Not from me. I felt suddenly exposed. Why is he asking? That is something you should ask Brandon. I think I already know. Henry nodded. He may believe Raymond left more than what is immediately visible. I remembered Brandon saying Dad promised I'd be taken care of. Maybe he'd been searching too. Maybe his questions about the house were only the beginning. Can he take this from me? No one can simply take it from you. That's not the same as no. Henry's eyes sharpened. No, it isn't. But Raymond's planning was thorough. I looked at the closed valuation report. How thorough? Thorough enough that I would advise anyone considering an unsupported challenge to think very carefully. For the first time that day, I felt something close to safety. Not because of the money, because someone had finally told me that Brandon's confidence didn't equal authority. What happens next? First, we verify the title to your house. And then, we deal with any estate inquiries properly. And the trust, we begin the administrative transfer process. I stood and put Raymond's letter carefully into my purse. Henry handed me the faded bank card. I stared at it. This little thing led to $7 million. Technically, it led you to Denise. And Denise led me to you. Raymond liked systems. I smiled sadly. Raymond liked making simple things unnecessarily complicated. That too. At the door I stopped. Henry. Yes. Was Raymond happy about the money? Henry considered the question. Not particularly. That surprised me. What was he happy about? The day the acquisition became likely, he told me he finally knew you would never have to depend on anyone. My eyes burned. Anyone, including our son. I left the office carrying no cash, no check, and nothing that looked different from what I'd brought in. Yet everything had changed. That morning, I had been a widow, sleeping in a friend's guest room, because my son believed he could decide where I belonged. By evening, I knew Raymond had left nearly $7 million protected for my future. But Henry's warning stayed with me. Brandon had already hired an attorney. I was already asking questions, and he was doing it without knowing what he was looking for. As I drove back toward Patricia's house, my phone rang through the car speakers. Brandon. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello. His voice was tight. Mom, where have you been? Taking care of something. What? Something your father left unfinished. There was silence. Then Brandon asked a question that told me Henry was right to warn me. Have you been talking to a lawyer? I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. For the first time since Raymond died, my son sounded nervous. And for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to make him feel better. My son came back with an attorney. Brandon's question followed me all the way back to Patricia's house. Have you been talking to a lawyer? I could have lied. Instead, I said yes. The silence on the other end lasted long enough to tell me that was the answer he feared. Why? I almost laughed. Why do you think, Mom, I'm asking a simple question? And I'm wondering why my son is worried that his 68-year-old mother spoke to an attorney after being locked out of her own house. I didn't lock you out. I gripped the steering wheel. Then what would you call changing the locks and refusing to give me a key? We've already discussed this. No, you explained your decision. That's different. He exhaled sharply. Who did you talk to? That's none of your business. Was it about Dad's estate? There it was. Not the house. Not my safety. Raymond's estate. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Mom. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. But beneath the anger, something had changed. 2 days earlier, Brandon's questions made me defensive. Now they made me observant. I had spent years answering my son's questions, because mothers answer. Where are the Christmas decorations? Do you still have my birth certificate? Can you loan me a little money until Friday? I'd never considered that I was allowed to ask why he needed an answer. Patricia was waiting when I arrived. She took one look at me. Either you found nothing, or you found something enormous. I set my purse on the kitchen table. I found something. Good something. I don't know yet. She waited. I remembered Henry's warning. Don't tell anyone yet. I can't talk about the details. Patricia nodded immediately. Then don't. No offense, no pressure, no entitlement. The contrast almost hurt. But I need to tell you one thing, I said. What? I wasn't crazy. Patricia reached across the table. I never thought you were. The next morning, Henry called at 8:12. I pulled the property records. I sat up in bed. And, the house is yours. I closed my eyes. You're sure? Completely. He explained that Raymond and I had held title in a form of ownership between spouses that transferred full ownership to the surviving spouse upon death. There was no share passing to Brandon, no probate delay, no ambiguity. The house was mine. Can Brandon sell it? No. Can he list it? Not legally on your behalf without authority. What about the power of attorney? You didn't sign it. No. Then he has no authority. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Henry, he changed my locks. I know. What do I do? We ask for immediate access. If he refuses, there are stronger options. Police, if necessary. The idea made my stomach turn. He's my son. And you're his mother. Neither fact changes property law. I looked toward the window. I don't want him arrested. I'm not suggesting that as a first step. Good. But Charlene, don't let your desire to avoid hurting Brandon become permission for him to keep hurting you. Raymond could have said that. Maybe that was why he'd trusted Henry. At 10:30. Patricia and I were having coffee when a dark sedan pulled into her driveway. Brandon stepped out. Another man emerged from the passenger side carrying a leather briefcase. Patricia looked through the window. Who's the suit? I think we're about to find out. Brandon rang the bell. Patricia opened it but didn't invite them inside. Morning. Is my mother here? I'm right here. I stepped into the hallway. Brandon looked tired. The man beside him extended his hand. Mrs. Boswell, I'm Eric Dalton. I represent Brandon in certain estate-related matters. I didn't take his hand. Why does Brandon need representation to speak to his mother? Eric lowered his hand. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Changing locks is difficult to misunderstand. Brandon sighed. Can we come inside? This isn't my house. Patricia crossed her arms. And I'm not inviting anybody in until Charlene wants them here. I nearly smiled. Let's talk outside. We moved to the porch. Eric opened his briefcase. Brandon's concern is that decisions may be made regarding Raymond's estate before the family has a complete understanding of his intentions. Which family? He hesitated. Your family. Raymond's wife is standing in front of you. Brandon stepped in. Mom, stopped turning everything into a fight. I didn't bring an attorney to Patricia's porch. Eric cleared his throat. Mr. Boswell understood from conversations with his father that certain property would eventually pass to him. There was that word. Eventually. I looked at Brandon. The house, among other things. What other things? He glanced at Eric. I saw it. He didn't know. He was fishing. Brandon, I said quietly, what exactly do you believe your father owned? His face tightened. That's what we're trying to establish. No, you're trying to establish it because you think some of it belongs to you. Dad told me I'd be taken care of. You keep saying that. Did he tell you the house would become yours while I was alive? No, but did he tell you that you could change the locks? Mom. Did he tell you to pack my medication into a cardboard box? His cheeks reddened. Eric looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Boswell, perhaps we should keep this focused on the estate. The house is part of what my son has been calling the estate. I reached into my purse and removed the copy Henry had prepared that morning. This is the deed information. Eric accepted it. He read silently. Brandon watched him. Something changed in the attorney's face. Well? Brandon asked. Eric looked at him. The property passed to your mother by operation of law. What does that mean? It means the house isn't part of the probate estate. Brandon stared at him. But Dad owned half. Not in the way you're thinking. I watched my son's confidence collapse by degrees. So Mom owns it. Yes. All of it. Yes. The silence was almost unbearable. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Brandon looked at me. You knew this. I learned it this morning. And you called a lawyer before talking to me. That question stunned me. You changed my locks before talking to a lawyer. I was trying to get things moving. Things that weren't yours to move. His face hardened. Fine. You own the house. Yes. But Dad still had an estate. Eric spoke quickly. Brandon. No, I want to understand. He turned toward me. Did Dad leave a separate will? I have nothing to discuss with you about that today. His eyes narrowed. So you did find something. I felt the secret sitting between us. $6.947, 310. I could have ended the argument in one sentence. I could have watched his expression change. Part of me wanted to. Then I remembered Henry. Don't introduce $7 million into an already volatile family situation. So I said nothing. Brandon stepped closer. What did Dad leave you? That's not why we're here. Then why are we here? Because I want my key. He stared at me. That's it. No. I kept my voice steady. You will cancel every conversation with Lisa Garner about selling my house. You will remove anything you brought into it without my permission. And you will give me every key. Brandon looked embarrassed. You're making this sound criminal. I'm making it sound final. Patricia stood behind me silent. Eric closed his briefcase. Brandon, I recommend you comply. My son looked at his own attorney as if he'd been betrayed. Seriously. Yes. Brandon reached into his pocket. He removed a small key ring. My house key was attached to it. He held it out. I didn't take it immediately. Are there copies, too? Where one with me, one with Megan. I want both. I'll get hers. Today. He dropped the key into my palm. Such a small object. But when my fingers closed around it, I felt something return that had nothing to do with property. Authority. My authority over my own life. Brandon looked at me. Are you really going to do this? Do what? Treat me like some stranger trying to steal from you. My anger disappeared. What remained was sadness. I didn't change the locks on your house, Brandon. He looked away. You have no idea what I'm dealing with. Then tell me. I can't. Then stop expecting me to surrender things I own to solve problems you won't explain. His jaw tightened. He turned toward the driveway. Eric gave me a small nod before following. But Brandon stopped at the steps. Without turning around, he said, "Dad wouldn't have wanted this." For the first time, those words didn't shake me. "I think your father wanted me to make my own decisions." Brandon looked back. Something in my face must have frightened him. "Who did you talk to?" I said nothing. Was it someone Dad knew? Still nothing. "Mom, what did you find?" I closed my fingers around the key. "My home." He stared at me for several seconds, then walked away. That afternoon, Henry accompanied me back to the house. Brandon had already left. I stood at the front door and inserted the new key. It turned. Inside the house smelled faintly of cardboard and furniture polish. Raymond's photograph was missing from the hallway table. I found it in a box marked personal. I put it back. Then I walked upstairs. For the first time since being locked out, I entered my bedroom. Raymond's sweater was still over the chair. His glasses were still beside the bed. I sat down and let myself cry. Not because I'd lost. Because I had won something I should never have been forced to fight for. Henry waited downstairs. When I finally joined him, he was standing beside the dining room window. "There's one more thing," he said. "What? Eric Dalton's office sent a formal inquiry this morning. About the estate." "Yes." "What are they looking for?" "Assets, trusts, anything Raymond may have held outside the obvious accounts." I looked toward the photograph I'd restored to the table. "Can they find it?" "Eventually, certain information may become relevant, but Brandon cannot simply demand access." I nodded. Then Henry said, "I think you should prepare yourself." "For what?" "Your son is going to realize the house wasn't the answer to his financial problems. And then," Henry's expression was grave, "then he's going to become much more interested in what his father actually left behind." I looked around the home Brandon had already treated like an inheritance. He had been willing to push me out for something worth a little over $700,000. He had no idea nearly $7 million existed, and I was beginning to wonder what would happen when he finally learned that it did. I went home. The first night back in my house, I left every light on downstairs. Not because I was afraid, because I could. For 3 days, other people had decided where I should sleep, which clothes I needed, which possessions mattered, and whether I was entitled to enter the home where I had lived for 31 years. That night, every switch I touched felt like a declaration. Mine. Not the electricity, the choice. Patricia helped me carry my boxes back from her car. When she placed the last one in the hallway, she looked around. "Want me to stay?" I almost said yes. Then I looked toward the staircase. "No." "You sure no?" She smiled. "Good answer." I laughed. "I need to do this." Patricia hugged me. "Call if you need anything." After she left, I locked the front door. Then I checked it twice. Raymond's habit. The second time, my hand remained on the deadbolt. "You would have hated this," I whispered. I wasn't sure whether I meant Brandon's behavior or the $7 million secret. Probably both. The next morning, I began putting the house back together. Not physically. Brandon hadn't destroyed anything. What he'd disrupted was harder to see. In the living room, I returned family photographs to the mantel. In Raymond's study, I removed the labels Brandon had placed on the boxes. Keep, donate, sell. I tore each one in half. Then I put Raymond's drafting tools back into the wooden drawer where he'd kept them. I wasn't pretending I would preserve everything forever. Someday I would decide what to keep. Someday I might even sell the house. But someday belonged to me. At 11, Lisa Garner called. "Charlene, I wanted to apologize." "You don't owe me the largest apology." I still should have confirmed that everyone with ownership authority was involved before discussing a listing. "Yes, you should have." She accepted that without arguing. "Brandon contacted me this morning. The valuation file has been closed." "Thank you." There won't be any listing. No. After we hung up, I sat quietly at the kitchen table. That was one battle finished. But Henry had warned me the larger one was beginning. He arrived that afternoon carrying a folder. I've been reviewing the information Brandon's attorney submitted. What did you find? More than I expected. He placed several documents on the table. Most concerned Brandon's development business. What am I looking at? Financial obligations. How did you get these? Some are public filings. Others were included in correspondence from his attorney because they're attempting to establish financial reliance on alleged promises from Raymond. I stared at him. Financial reliance. Essentially, Brandon appears prepared to argue that he made certain decisions because he expected support from his father. Can he do that? He can argue anything. Can he win? Henry removed his glasses. There's a substantial difference between a father saying, "I'll always take care of you," and a legally enforceable promise of inheritance. I thought of Brandon repeating Raymond's supposed promise. Dad said I'd be taken care of. Maybe Brandon had repeated it so often that he'd turned affection into a contract. How bad are his finances? Henry hesitated. You should hear that from Brandon. He's had plenty of opportunities to tell me. True. Show me what you legally can. Henry turned the first page. Brandon's current development project involves several properties in Chesterfield County. He and his partners had borrowed aggressively, expecting sales and refinancing to cover short-term obligations. Then construction costs increased. One investor withdrew. 2 anticipated buyers disappeared. Interest accumulated. How much does he owe? I asked. Personally, yes. Based on what I can confirm, several $100,000 in guarantees and unsecured obligations. I felt sick. Could he lose his house? Potentially. His business? Potentially. And Megan knows. I can't answer that. I remembered her whispering in my kitchen. What happens when the payment comes due? She knew enough. Is that why they were pushing me to sell? Likely. I looked at the estimated value Lisa had prepared, over $700,000. If Brandon had convinced me to sell, then convinced me to help him afterward, he could have solved at least part of his crisis, or postponed it. I remembered Raymond's letter. There is a difference between helping someone stand and letting them use you as the ground beneath their feet. He wasn't trying to steal the house, I said quietly. Henry waited. He was trying to get me to sell it voluntarily. That would have been much easier for him. And the power of attorney, that concerns me more. Why? Because it would have allowed him broad authority over your ordinary finances. But not Raymond's trust. No. I looked toward the kitchen drawer where the unsigned document remained. What if I had signed it? Then we would be having a much more complicated conversation. A chill went through me. I folded my arms. I want to speak to Brandon. Henry studied me. Today? Yes. About the trust? No. Good. I want him to tell me the truth about the debt. Brandon arrived shortly after 6, alone. I hadn't seen him alone since before Raymond died. For a few seconds we stood awkwardly in the foyer. His eyes moved around the house. He noticed the photographs restored to the mantel. You put everything back. Not everything. He nodded. Can I come in? The fact that he asked mattered. Yes. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd asked about the mortgage. This time there were no brochures, no realtor reports, no power of attorney, just mother and son. How much do you owe? I asked. His expression tightened. Henry's been investigating me. Answer the question. Mom. How much? He stared at his hands. I don't know the final number. That's not believable. It changes. Give me the number you know. He swallowed. Personally guaranteed a little over 300,000. I closed my eyes briefly. And the business? More. How much more? Close to $1 million across the project, but that's not all mine. How did this happen? He leaned back. Slowly. That answer at least sounded honest. He explained the project. Cost overruns, delays, a partner leaving, loans used to cover other loans. Every time they thought they were 30 days from solving the problem, another problem appeared. Why didn't you tell me? What were you going to do? Be your mother. He looked away. Dad knew. 3 years ago. Brandon's head snapped toward me. You know about that? Yes. His face changed. What exactly do you know? That you asked him for $450,000. Silence. That he refused. Brandon said nothing. That you then suggested using this house as collateral. His cheeks reddened. That was different. How? It was a business opportunity. You asked your father to risk our home. I wasn't asking you to move. You were asking him to risk something that belonged to both of us without even speaking to me. He would never have lost the house. Then why did you need it as collateral? He looked away. That was answer enough. Did you tell Raymond the house would eventually be yours? His eyes returned to mine. He told Henry that. Did you? Brandon rubbed his forehead. I was angry. So yes. I didn't mean it the way it sounds. How did you mean it? I thought. He stopped. What? His voice dropped. I thought Dad had money. I became very still. Why? He always seemed too calm about everything. That's your evidence. No. I saw documents once, years ago. Something related to a company. Piedmont. His eyes widened. That told me he recognized the name. You know about Piedmont? I asked you a question. He exhaled. Yes, Piedmont. How much did you think Raymond had? I didn't know. Did you know about a trust? No. The answer came immediately. I believed him. What did you think would happen after your father died? He looked down. I thought there would be more. More than what? The house, investments, something. And you thought it would go to you. Eventually. The word hung between us. I leaned forward. Brandon listened carefully. Eventually is not a financial plan. He said nothing. You built debt around money you didn't own. I thought Dad would help. He said no. I was angry. He said no. Brandon pushed his chair back slightly. You don't understand what it's like to watch everything you've built collapse. And you don't understand what it's like to bury your husband and discover your son has already started calculating what comes next. His face fell. For once he didn't defend himself. I wasn't waiting for Dad to die. Maybe not consciously, Mom. But the moment he did, you asked about the mortgage, the deed, insurance, my savings. He stared at the table. And then you tried to move me. I thought selling made sense. For whom? He couldn't answer. I felt tears in my eyes but refused to look away. Do you know what hurt most? The locks. No. He looked up. The assumption. What assumption? That because your father died first, I became the temporary person standing between you and what you believed would someday be yours. Brandon's eyes filled. I don't think that. You behaved like you did. Silence settled over us. Then he asked quietly, what did Dad leave you? There it was. The question Henry had warned me about. I could feel the truth pressing against my ribs. Nearly $7 million. A trust. 30 years of Raymond's patience. I looked at my son and wondered whether telling him would destroy whatever remained between us or finally expose what was already broken. Why do you want to know? His answer came too quickly. Because I'm his son. That's not a reason. He looked at me. Because I need to know whether everything he told me was a lie. What did he tell you? That family takes care of family. My heart hurt. Maybe you misunderstood what taking care of someone means. He stood. Did he leave you something or not? I stood too. Yes. Brandon froze. I had not planned to say it. But once the word was out there was no taking it back. His eyes searched my face. How much? I thought about Henry's warning. I thought about Raymond's letter. And I thought about the man standing in front of me, not the little boy whose height was marked inside the hallway closet, but the 42-year-old man who had gambled on an inheritance he did not own. Not tonight, I said. His face tightened. Mom. You asked whether your father left something, I answered. Why won't you tell me? Because before we discuss what Raymond left behind, you need to understand one thing. What? I looked directly at him. None of it became yours simply because he died. Brandon stared at me. Then he glanced toward Raymond's study. For the first time, I saw something new in his expression. Not confidence. Fear. He knew I had discovered something. He simply had no idea how large it was. And as he stood in the house he'd once believed was only waiting to become his, I realized the next truth I told him would change our relationship forever. The secret I finally told him. Brandon left that night without learning the number. For the next 2 days he called 6 times. I answered none of them. That wasn't punishment. I needed time to understand why I was going to tell him. If I revealed Raymond's trust while I was angry, the $7 million would become a weapon. I could already imagine the moment. Brandon's face changing. Megan realizing the woman they'd tried to relocate was worth more than either of them had guessed. And some wounded parts of me wanted that moment. That frightened me. Raymond's money had existed in my life for less than a week, and already it was tempting me to use it for something it had never been intended to buy. Revenge. On Friday morning, Henry called. How are you? Still angry. Good, I laughed. That's an unusual thing for an attorney to say. Anger isn't always bad. It tells you where the injury is. And what am I supposed to do with it? Don't let it sign documents. That sounded like something Raymond would have appreciated. I want to tell Brandon. The amount? Yes. Henry was quiet. Why? Because he's already searching for it. That's true. And because I don't want our relationship to become a game where I know something and wait for him to discover it. Also reasonable. But mostly because I need to see what happens when he knows. Henry understood immediately. You want to know whether he sees you or the money? The words hurt. Yes. That afternoon I called Brandon. Come over at 6. Can Megan come? I almost said no. Then I changed my mind. Yes. If Megan had participated in decisions about my future, she could hear the truth too. They arrived exactly at 6. Megan was carrying a covered casserole. I almost smiled at the absurdity. She hadn't brought me dinner when I was sleeping at Patricia's. Now she had baked something. I made chicken tetrazzini, she said. Thank you. She placed it on the counter. Brandon didn't remove his coat. You said you wanted to talk. I do. We sat in the living room. Raymond's chair remained empty beside the fireplace. I had deliberately chosen that room. Maybe I wanted his presence there. Maybe I needed it. Brandon leaned forward. What did Dad leave? Megan touched his arm. Brandon. What we've been dancing around this for days. I looked at him. Before I answer, I want to ask you something. He sighed. Fine. If your father had left nothing beyond the house and ordinary retirement accounts, would you still be sitting here? His face tightened. Of course. Would you? I'm your son. That wasn't my question. Megan shifted uncomfortably. Charlene, we're all grieving. Yes, we are. I looked at her. And grief didn't make you bring a realtor into my home. Her face flushed. That was Brandon's decision. Brandon turned. Seriously. I'm not saying I disagreed. I'm saying you arranged it. Their eyes met. There it was, the first crack. Money hadn't even been mentioned yet. I don't want another argument, I said. I want both of you to understand why I'm telling you this. Brandon looked back at me. Then tell us. Your father had an investment. His expression changed immediately. Piedmont. Yes. He sat straighter. I knew it. You knew the name. You didn't know what it was. How much? I ignored the question. More than 30 years ago, Raymond did engineering work for Piedmont Land Development. They couldn't fully pay him, so he accepted an ownership interest. Megan's eyes moved between us. Ownership? Yes. What happened to it? Brandon asked. He kept it. All these years? Yes. I explained the expansion, the mergers, the reinvested distributions, the acquisition. Brandon barely moved. Megan did. She leaned forward with every sentence. Finally, Brandon interrupted. Mom, how much I looked toward Raymond's chair. For 1 second I wanted him there so badly that the room blurred. Then I faced my son. The current estimated value of the trust is just under $7 million. Nothing happened. Not immediately. Brandon stared at me as though I'd spoken another language. Megan's mouth opened slightly. 7 million, Brandon whispered. Approximately. Dollars. I almost laughed. Yes, Brandon, dollars. He stood, then sat again. That's impossible. That's what I said. $7 million. Close to it. Megan recovered first. Charlene, that's incredible. Her voice had changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Warm, soft, almost excited. Raymond must have wanted to make sure the whole family was secure. I looked at her. The trust was created primarily to make sure I was secure. Of course, she smiled quickly. That's what I mean. You first, obviously. Obviously. 3 weeks earlier, she had been helping choose where I should move. Brandon stared at the carpet. Did Dad know it was worth that much? He knew the projected value. And he never told me. He never told me either. But you're getting it. I'm the primary beneficiary. His head lifted. What does that mean for me? There it was. Not, are you okay? Not, what are you going to do? Not, I can't believe Dad kept this from us. What does that mean for me? I felt something inside me become very calm. Nothing automatically, Brandon blinked. What? You don't automatically receive any portion of the $7 million. He laughed once. That's ridiculous. Why? Because I'm his son. Yes. So being Raymond's son does not make you owner of Raymond's assets. Megan stepped in. I think what Brandon means is that Raymond always believed in family. So do I. And $7 million is more than one person needs. The room went silent. Megan realized what she'd said. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I just mean that this could solve so many problems. Brandon shot her a look. Stop. No, Brandon, we need to be honest. She turned to me. Your son is in a financial crisis. You now have the ability to fix it without changing your lifestyle at all. There it was. The transformation Henry had warned me about. The money had been mine for only a few days, and already someone else had calculated what I didn't need. Megan, do you know why Raymond structured the trust this way? She shook her head. Because he was afraid of exactly this conversation. Her face went pale. Brandon stood. Don't put that on us. I'm not putting anything on you. You're saying Dad hid $7 million because of me. Not originally. But later. After you asked him for $450,000 and then asked him to risk our home, yes, he changed the estate plan. Brandon stared at me. You talked to Henry about that. Raymond documented it. So Dad spent years planning how to keep his money away from me. No. That's exactly what this is. His voice rose. He thought I was some kind of failure. I don't think that's what he believed. Then why give everything to you? Because I was his wife. He flinched. I hadn't meant the sentence cruelly, but truth sometimes sounds cruel when entitlement has been standing in its place. Megan stood beside him. Nobody is saying Charlene shouldn't be protected. Protected. I noticed the word immediately. A week ago, they had used it to justify controlling me. Now it meant something entirely different. But Brandon is his only child, she continued. Surely Raymond didn't intend for him to receive nothing. I looked at Brandon. His anger faded slightly. He was waiting for my answer. Your father did leave something for you. The room became completely still. Brandon slowly sat down. What? I don't know whether leave is the right word. How much? Stop asking that. He stared at me. What am I supposed to ask? Ask what your father wanted for you. His face tightened. He's dead, Mom. I know. He doesn't get to lecture me anymore. The sentence hit harder than he intended. Megan touched his shoulder. Brandon. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I looked at Raymond's empty chair. So am I. After a moment, Brandon asked more quietly, "What did he leave?" "I haven't been given every detail yet." That wasn't entirely true. Henry had explained the basic structure, but I wanted Brandon to hear it formally. "What I know is that Raymond created a separate provision for you. Part of the trust. Separate from what I control for myself." "How much?" I gave him a look. He looked down. "Sorry." Megan asked, "Can Charlene decide whether he gets it?" "No." That surprised both of them. "So Dad did leave me something," Brandon said. "Yes." Relief crossed his face. Too quickly. I hated noticing that. "Then maybe this whole thing has been misunderstood." "No." His relief vanished. "What does that mean?" "It means your father didn't leave you a check." "What did he leave?" "A choice." Brandon frowned. "What kind of choice?" "Henry will explain the terms." "Terms?" "Yes." His voice hardened. "Of course there are terms." I didn't respond. "What does Dad want me to do?" "Apologize. Sell my business. Admit he was right about everything." "I don't know every requirement." "But you know something." "I know enough to tell you that the money isn't available simply because you want it." He stood again. "This is unbelievable." Megan looked at him. "Maybe we should hear the conditions first." He turned on her. "5 minutes ago, you were telling Mom she could solve our problems. And maybe this is how." I watched them. Raymond had been right about one thing. Money distorted people. But I was beginning to understand something else. Sometimes money didn't change anyone at all. Sometimes it simply turned up the light. Brandon walked toward the window. After a long silence, he asked, "When do I meet Henry?" "Monday." He nodded. "Fine." Then he turned toward me. "Mom, if Dad made this impossible, will you help me?" There was a time when I would have answered before he finished the sentence. "Of course, you're my son. We'll figure it out." Instead, I asked, "Help you do what?" His eyes met mine. He didn't have an answer. And that was when I knew Raymond's final provision wasn't really about money. It was about whether Brandon could learn the difference between being rescued and being helped. I walked them to the door. Megan hugged me. It was the first time she'd done that since the funeral. I didn't pull away, but I noticed. Brandon stepped onto the porch, then turned back. "Mom." "Yes." "Did Dad really leave me something?" I looked at my son. The little boy I had raised was still somewhere inside the frightened man standing before me. "Yes." His shoulders relaxed. "But it isn't money you can simply take." His expression changed again. "What is it?" I thought of Henry's explanation. 2 years. Financial counseling. Full disclosure. Responsibility. A chance Raymond had designed instead of an inheritance Brandon could consume. "Your father left you one last opportunity," I said. "To do what?" I held his gaze. "To prove that he was wrong to worry about you." Brandon said nothing. Then he walked to his car. Monday morning he would learn exactly what that opportunity required. And for the first time since Raymond died, the next decision wasn't mine to make. It was Brandon's. My husband's last test. Monday morning. Brandon arrived at Henry Whitaker's office 12 minutes early. That alone told me how frightened he was. My son had been late to almost every family gathering since he was 25. Christmas dinner, birthdays, even Raymond's retirement party. But when money was waiting behind a closed door, Brandon arrived early. I hated myself for thinking that. Then I reminded myself that noticing a pattern wasn't the same as condemning a person. Megan didn't come. When I asked Brandon why, he shrugged. "This is between me and Dad." I almost corrected him. Then I decided not to. Maybe in a strange way he was right. Henry greeted us and led us into the same office where I had first read Raymond's letter. Brandon sat beside me. There was a space between our chairs, small, but noticeable. Henry opened a folder. "Before we begin, Brandon, I want to make something clear. What I'm about to explain isn't controlled by your mother." Brandon glanced at me. "I know." "No, I need you to understand that. Charlene cannot simply waive these requirements because you ask her to." "Fine." And the primary trust established for Charlene's benefit is separate. Brandon's jaw tightened. I understand. Henry studied him. Then he continued. Your father created a conditional fund for you. How much? Henry didn't react to the question. $250,000. Brandon froze. I watched his face. $250,000 was a fraction of Raymond's larger trust, but in Brandon's financial condition, it could change everything. He leaned forward. When do I get it? Henry folded his hands. You don't. Brandon blinked. What? You don't receive $250,000 directly. Then what does conditional fund mean? It means the funds may be used for your benefit if specific requirements are satisfied. Brandon laughed bitterly. Of course. Would you like to hear them? I'm here, aren't I? Henry didn't respond to the hostility. First, you must provide complete disclosure of your personal debts, guarantees, business obligations, and any liabilities that could reasonably affect your financial position. Brandon frowned. To who? An independent financial counselor and the fiduciary administrator. Why? Because your father didn't want money applied to problems nobody fully understood. I understand my own problems. Henry remained calm. Based on the information available, Raymond wasn't convinced of that. Brandon looked at me. Did you tell him about my current debt? No. Then how would Dad know? He didn't know the current numbers, Henry said. These provisions were created 3 years ago. Brandon stared at him. 3 years. The Henrico Project. The request for $450,000. The house as collateral. I could almost see him putting the pieces together. What else, he asked. You must participate in professional financial counseling. For how long? Long enough to establish and follow a documented plan. I'm 42 years old. Yes. I don't need someone teaching me how to make a budget. Henry glanced at the file. Your current creditors may disagree. Brandon's face reddened. I almost intervened. Old instinct. Protect my child from embarrassment. Then I remembered Raymond's letter. Helping someone stand was not the same as becoming the ground beneath them. I stayed quiet. Henry continued. Third, you must demonstrate financial stability over a 2-year period. Brandon stared. 2 years? Yes. I don't have 2 years. The fund does. My business could collapse in 2 months. Then the fund isn't designed to save your business. What is it designed to save? Henry paused. You. The room went silent. Brandon looked away. Henry continued. If you comply with the conditions, approved distributions may be made toward qualifying debt reduction, restructuring, or financially responsible future investments. So I can't touch the money. Correct. Who decides what's responsible? The fiduciary administrator, guided by the trust terms and professional recommendations. This is insane. No. Henry's voice remained quiet. It's restrictive. That's different. Brandon stood. This is Dad controlling me from the grave. I looked at him. Sit down. He turned toward me. You're okay with this? I didn't create it. But you're okay with it? I haven't decided how I feel. That's convenient. Brandon. No, Mom. He leaves you almost $7 million with control over your life, and he leaves me homework. The cruelty in his tone stung, but I heard something underneath it. Pain. Maybe he thought I needed protection and you needed accountability. Brandon laughed. Accountability. There's the word. Henry waited until Brandon sat again. There's one final provision. Of course there is. If you refuse the conditions entirely, the fund does not revert to Charlene. Brandon frowned. Where does it go? After the applicable period, it transfers to a scholarship fund supporting students entering engineering and skilled technical fields in Virginia. Brandon stared at him. So Dad would rather give my money to strangers. Henry's expression sharpened. It isn't your money. The sentence landed hard. Brandon looked at him. Henry continued. That distinction is central to everything Raymond wrote. Brandon's face went pale. I saw anger gathering again. Then Henry removed an envelope. I believe you should hear your father's reasoning before deciding what he intended. Brandon's eyes fixed on the envelope. Another letter. Instructions attached to the provision. To me. About you. Brandon looked almost disappointed. Henry unfolded the document. Would you like me to read it? My son hesitated, then nodded. Henry began. Brandon is my son, and I love him. If he is hearing this, he may believe these conditions mean I lost faith in him. The opposite is true. Brandon's expression shifted. Henry continued. If I believed Brandon incapable of changing, I would leave him nothing. I created this because I believe the man he can still become is worth more than the mistakes he has made. I felt tears forming. Brandon stared at the floor. I have helped my son financially before. Too often, perhaps. Each time I told myself I was giving him another chance. Looking back, I sometimes removed the consequence before he had the opportunity to learn from it. Henry paused. I remembered all those mysterious recoveries in Brandon's life. Raymond had rescued him. Quietly. Repeatedly. And maybe both of us had mistaken rescue for love. Henry read on. The day Brandon asked me to secure his loan against our home changed something for me. Not because he needed help. Everyone needs help sometimes. It changed because he spoke about the house as though Charlene and I were merely holding it until it became his. Brandon closed his eyes. My chest hurt. I don't want my son punished for that sentence. People say ugly things when they are afraid, but I also don't want to leave him enough money to make sure he never has to understand why the sentence was wrong. Henry's voice softened. If Brandon accepts these conditions, the money should help him build stability after he begins building it himself. If he refuses, then giving him the money would only prove my concern was justified. Brandon suddenly stood. Stop. Henry lowered the paper. There's only a little more. I said stop. His eyes were wet. I'd seen my son angry many times. I had rarely seen him ashamed. He walked toward the window. Dad really thought I was that pathetic? No, I said. He turned. You heard the same thing I did. I heard your father say he believed you could change. Because he thought I needed changing. Don't you? The question escaped before I could soften it. Brandon stared at me. I stood. You changed my locks. His jaw tightened. You packed my clothes. I know. You tried to sell my home because your debts had become my emergency. I said I know. No, I don't think you do. My voice broke. You keep talking about what your father thought of you. Have you once asked what your behavior made me think? He looked away. I was desperate. I know. I could lose everything. I know. And you have $7 million. There it was. I took a breath. Yes. You could fix this tomorrow. Maybe. He turned back. Then why won't you? Because your father spent years fixing things for you, and somehow we ended up here anyway. Brandon flinched. I hated hurting him. But I no longer believed avoiding pain was the same as helping. Henry placed Raymond's letter on the desk. There's one final paragraph. Brandon shook his head. I don't want to hear it. Take it with you. I don't want it. Then leave it. Brandon grabbed his coat. I followed him into the hallway. Brandon. He stopped. I wanted to hug him. Every mothering instinct inside me screamed to close the distance. But I didn't. Whatever you decide, I said, I love you. He laughed bitterly. That doesn't feel very useful right now. Love isn't always useful. He looked at me. Maybe that's something your father and I should have learned sooner. His face crumpled for half a second. Then the wall returned. He walked away. The elevator doors closed behind him. I returned to Henry's office. Raymond's letter remained on the desk. Do you think he'll come back? I asked. Henry didn't pretend to know. I think that's what Raymond wanted to find out. I looked at the final paragraph Brandon had refused to hear. Henry slid it toward me. I read it silently. If my son chooses the difficult road, tell him I am proud of him before he takes the first step, not after he reaches the end. I pressed the page to my chest. For the next 3 weeks, Brandon didn't call. Neither did Megan. The silence was painful, but I didn't chase it. For the first time in my life as a mother, I allowed my grown son to sit with the consequences of his own choices. And somewhere between those quiet days, I began to understand Raymond's final test. It wasn't really asking whether Brandon deserved $250,000. It was asking whether he could finally stop living as though somebody else's money was the answer to his life. What $7 million could never buy, for 26 days after Brandon walked out of Henry's office. I didn't hear my son's voice. At first I counted the days. Then I stopped. That was harder than calling him. Every instinct I had developed over 42 years of motherhood told me to reach for the phone. When Brandon was 8 and angry with me, I went to his room. When he was 17 and heartbroken, I sat beside him until 2 in the morning. When he was 34 and his first major business deal collapsed, I drove across Richmond with a casserole because feeding someone was the only way I knew to say, "You don't have to carry this alone." But this time carrying it for him was part of the problem. So I waited. And while I waited, I began learning how to live in my own life again. I didn't sell the house. Not because I had decided to remain there forever. Because I wanted my first major decision after Raymond's death to come from desire rather than pressure. I hired a locksmith and replaced the locks again. That time I chose them. I gave Patricia a spare key. Nobody else. Raymond's study took longer. For weeks I couldn't enter without expecting to see him behind the desk. Eventually I stopped trying to preserve the room like a museum. I donated old technical manuals. I kept his drafting instruments. I moved his desk beside the window and placed a comfortable reading chair where filing cabinets had been. On one shelf, I put the faded Commonwealth Heritage Bank card in a small wooden box beside Raymond's letter. Not because the card was worth anything, because it reminded me how something seemingly insignificant had led me back to my own independence. Henry helped me assemble a team to manage the trust responsibly. The first meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. Investments, taxes, insurance, estate planning, charitable giving. By the end, my head hurt. But I refused to let anyone tell me I was too old to understand my own finances. Explain it again. I told them whenever something wasn't clear. And they did. I established enough income to know I would never have to depend financially on Brandon or anyone else. Then I began thinking about what money could do beyond making me comfortable. One afternoon, Patricia told me about a local organization helping older women facing housing instability after divorce, widowhood, or financial abuse. The phrase housing instability stopped me. I remembered standing in my driveway while my clothes waited in cardboard boxes. I had Patricia. I had legal ownership. And though I didn't know it yet, I had nearly $7 million behind me. Many women had none of those things. I made my first significant charitable contribution quietly. No ceremony, no photograph, no plaque. I also expanded the scholarship provision Raymond had designed: engineering students, trade programs, women returning to school later in life. That last category was mine. Raymond would have pretended it was unnecessary. Then he would have secretly loved it. Meanwhile, Brandon's life was shrinking. I didn't learn that from him. Patricia heard through a mutual acquaintance that Brandon and Megan had listed their house. A week later, Henry confirmed that Brandon's business was restructuring several obligations. I wanted to help. God, I wanted to help. I could have written a check large enough to make the immediate pain disappear. But every time I returned to one question. Then what? If I erased the consequences, what would be different? 6 months later. One evening, Megan called. "Charlene, can we talk?" "Of course." Her voice was tight. "We're selling the house." I heard. "Did Brandon tell you that?" "No." Silence. "We don't have a choice." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" I closed my eyes. "Yes. You could prevent this." There it was. "Megan, you could write one check and none of this would have to happen." And then, "What do you mean? What changes afterward?" She didn't answer. "Brandon needs help," she said. "He has an entire path available to him." "You mean Raymond's ridiculous test?" "I mean financial counseling, debt disclosure, and accountability. He's a grown man. Then he can make a grown man's decision." Her voice hardened. "I don't understand how you can watch your own son lose his home when you're sitting on $7 million. The sentence hurt, but it didn't move me. "I'm not sitting on $7 million, Megan. I'm learning to manage an inheritance my husband spent decades building. That's semantics. No, it's the difference between seeing money as responsibility and seeing it as rescue. She ended the call shortly afterward. For weeks I heard nothing again. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, almost 4 months after Raymond's funeral, someone knocked. When I opened the door, Brandon stood on the porch, alone. He looked thinner, older. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "Can I come in?" The question mattered. Yes. He carried a thick black binder. We sat at the kitchen table. He placed it between us. "What's that, my mess?" I almost smiled. He opened it. Credit cards, personal guarantees, business loans, tax documents, payment plans, every debt arranged behind labeled dividers. I met with the counselor. My heart jumped. When, 7 weeks ago, I didn't speak. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure I'd keep going. But you did. Yeah. He looked embarrassed. Turns out I needed someone to teach me how to make a budget. I remembered his words in Henry's office. I'm 42 years old. I don't need someone teaching me how to make a budget. What happened to the house? We sold it. I'm sorry. I'm not. That surprised me. He leaned back. I thought I would be. But Megan and I were spending money to maintain a life we couldn't afford because I wanted everyone to think I was successful. Where are you living? A townhouse in Midlothian. And Megan. She's there. Something in his voice told me their marriage was strained. I didn't ask. That was their story to repair. Brandon turned one page in the binder. I sold the boat. I blinked. You loved that boat. I loved telling people I had a boat. I couldn't help laughing. He smiled. For 1 second he looked like my boy again. Then his face became serious. Mom, I came here to apologize. You already apologized. No. He shook his head. I said words because I was cornered. That's different. I waited. He looked towards the hallway. When Dad died, I was sad. His voice cracked. But I was scared too. And almost immediately I started thinking about what his death meant financially. He swallowed. I hate admitting that. I said nothing. I told myself I was protecting you because that sounded better than admitting I needed access to something you owned. Tears filled my eyes. The worst thing I did wasn't changing the locks. I thought of what I'd told him months earlier. No. He shook his head. The worst thing was deciding that your life had become an inconvenience between me and something I thought I'd inherit. The words hurt. But this time truth also healed. I treated you like the house was already mine and you were just still living in it. He wiped his face. I'm ashamed of that. I reached across the table, not to rescue him, just to take his hand. I was very angry with you. I know. I still am sometimes. I know. I don't trust you the way I did before. His eyes lowered. I know. But I love you. He nodded. I know that too. I squeezed his hand. Those things can exist together. A year after Raymond died, Brandon still hadn't received $1 from the conditional fund, but he had paid down a meaningful portion of his personal debt. His business survived in a smaller form. He stopped chasing developments he couldn't afford and returned to residential real estate. Megan and I remained cautious with each other. Healing didn't happen because money appeared. It happened slowly through boundaries, uncomfortable conversations and actions repeated long enough to become believable. One Sunday, Brandon came over to help repair the deck Raymond had promised to fix. At sunset, we sat on the steps drinking iced tea. I used to think Dad didn't trust me, he said. And now, he looked across the yard. I think he trusted me enough not to make failure comfortable. I smiled. That sounded like Raymond. After Brandon left, I went upstairs and opened the wooden box containing the old bank card. $7 million had changed my future. But it couldn't buy back my husband. It couldn't erase what Brandon had done. It couldn't purchase trust, forgiveness, or family. Those things had to be rebuilt without money. I finally understood what Raymond had truly left me. Not wealth, choice. The choice to stay in my home or leave it. The choice to help without surrendering myself. The choice to love my son without financing his mistakes. And the choice to forgive without handing back the keys to someone who had once locked me outside. For most of my life, I thought being a good mother meant always opening the door. At 68,